Tonight's meeting of the Metropolitan Nashville and Davidson County Council is coming to you live from the council chambers at the historic Metro Courthouse. It's a public affairs presentation of the Metro Nashville Network. Good evening, everyone. I'm Pat Nolan, your announcer for this program. Tonight, the 15th Metropolitan Council holds its 56th business meeting of a four-year term. This is the second council meeting of 2022. Tonight's council agenda is 27 pages long, involving 69 pieces of legislation. That includes 25 resolutions, 16 first reading bills, one second reading piece of legislation, and 27 ordinances on third and final reading. On the agenda, there are also 5 appointments to city boards and commissions, including ones to the Metro Community Oversight Board, the Convention Center Authority, the Farmers Market Board, the Board of the Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency, and the Solid Waste Regional Board. Council will also again debate a council rule change to alter the voting threshold to call for a public hearing by motion of a council member on pending legislation. It will go down from a 2/3 vote required to a simple majority. Tonight's meeting is again being held during a high number and spread of COVID-19 infections, including the highly contagious Omicron variant, both here in Nashville and across Tennessee. State law has stripped the Metropolitan Health Department of the power to continue a mask mandate in all city-owned buildings. Therefore, wearing masks tonight is recommended but not required. Most significant legislation the council will approve tonight is on third and final reading is the approval of BL 2021-1052. This is the redistricting proposal from the city's planning commission regarding the 35 Metro Council district seats and the 9 Metro school board positions that will be in place for the next decade. This is required in the light of the population changes found in the 2020 census. The council can either accept or reject this plan. It cannot amend it. Council staff has worked with the council through the planning commission staff has worked with the council through 3 versions of this plan before it was even submitted. The plan would go to a public referendum if the council rejects it, and the council would add its own plan for consideration if it could do so. That will not happen, however. The bill has passed on the consent count on both the first and second reading. It's expected to pass again easily for a final time tonight, avoiding the controversy now ongoing in the Tennessee legislature over its own redistricting, as well as for the state's congressional seats. There are again several resolutions on the council agenda tonight that are of interest, including some involving Metro Parks. RS 2022-1332 approves an in-kind grant for Greenways of Nashville to provide improvements to 7 trailheads to the Stone Rivers Greenway and 3 trailheads on the Whites Creek Greenway. RS 2022-1334 would accept another in-kind grant of just under $7,000 from the Centennial Parks Conservancy to fund and purchase the installation of flooring in the Parthenon's West Gallery and replace signage at the Parthenon's entrance. Finally, concerning parks, RS 2022-1333 would allocate an in-kind grant of nearly $3,000 from Creative Parks Nashville to fund and purchase the installation of a historic marker near the front of the Centennial Park Arts Center. The marker would acknowledge the facility as a former swimming pool where the old city of Nashville closed and never reopened to avoid desegregation back in the 1960s. Flood control and prevention efforts are also before the council tonight. 4 resolutions, RS 2022-342, 3242 through 3245 would approve applications for about $2 million in flood mitigation assistance grants from the state of Tennessee through the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency. Funds would go to the acquisition of homes in the floodplain or on the floodway. Council will also consider tonight RS 2022-1336 would approve a joint funding agreement with the U.S. Department of Interior, United States Geological Service, and approximately would basically acquire 525 square miles of current LIDAR, LIDAR, derived high-resolution elevation data for Davidson County, Nashville, Tennessee. That is for use in dam safety assessments, engineering design and design reviews, conservation planning, research, floodplain mapping, and hydrological modeling in the future. Metro's cost for this will be about $219,000. Also related to water resources, under Resolution RS 2022-3347, the council would request the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to keep the Cook Recreation Area near the Percy Priest Reservoir public. Other memorializing resolutions, the council will honor the lives of civic leaders Yusuf Joseph and Veronica Strobel-Siegenthaler. The body will also honor the achievements of ESPN basketball commentator Carolyn Peck, who played and coached at Vanderbilt and other schools. Council will also recognize the 75th anniversary of the Tennessee State University Aristocrats of Band, as well as the band's recent participation in the 75th annual Tournament of Roses Parade in Pasadena, California. The council will also recognize the 30th anniversary of the Tennessee Tribune newspaper. Finally, in a late resolution, the council will honor the successful football season of East High School, which finished second in the state in its classification in Tennessee. One other bill, BL 2021-1055 on third reading, will give an honorary designation of a portion of 40th Avenue North between Indiana Avenue and Clinton Avenue is Charles Dungy Way. The late Mr. Dungy was an internationally recognized jazz bassist and vocalist who dedicated his career to jazz performance and education. He toured with Pearl Bailey and Sammy Davis Jr. and worked alongside jazz greats Milt Jackson, Eartha Kitt, Betty Carter, and Hank Crawford. He was the first black bassist to play with the Nashville Symphony back in the 1970s and served as a faculty member at Tennessee State University. Finally, a bit of a rarity, there's only one bill on the agenda tonight on second reading. It concerns the ongoing debate in the council about whether Metro Police can license plate readers, can use those license plate readers as a crime-fighting tool. Some say the city is behind doing this compared to other surrounding communities, while others are concerned about potential privacy and racial profiling issues. The council has declined to approve any legislation on this matter. Vice Mayor Jim Swimmer has even offered his assistance to help identify compromise legislation. It is unclear if some agreement has been reached or if the bill is up again because the main sponsor wants an up or down vote on it on second reading. There are amendments submitted for the bill, which may be another sign that the sponsors plan to push the bill ahead tonight on second reading. If it is passed on second reading and goes to third reading, it will join a companion or a rival bill there that's been on third reading and deferred there for some time. If you want to follow tonight's meeting as it progresses, you can find the agenda and the staff analysis online. Just go to the Metro Council portion of the Nashville.gov website and then to the Legislative Information Center. We'll also be placing the bill numbers on the screen when they come up for consideration so you can follow along and keep up where we are on the meeting agenda. We'll be going now to Vice Mayor Jim Shulman. He'll be gaveling tonight's council meeting to order shortly.
Will the meeting please come to order? We welcome you to the Metro Council. Today is Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. Will all members of the council as well as the public please rise for the invocation, remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Our invocation tonight is brought to us by Reverend Andrew Ward, who is a guest of council members Zach Young.
In honor of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, we just celebrated his holiday. This is a prayer by him. Let us pray. Most gracious and all-wise God, before whose face the generations rise and fall, thou in whom we live and move and have our being, we thank thee for all of thy good and gracious gifts, for life and for health, for food and for raiment, for the beauties of nature and the love of human nature. We come before thee painfully aware of our inadequacies and shortcomings. We realize that we stand surrounded with the mountains of love, and yet we deliberately dwell in the valley of hate. We stand amid the forces of truth and deliberately lie. We are forever offered the high road, and yet we choose to travel the low road. For these sins, O God, forgive. Break the spell of that which blinds our minds. Purify our hearts that we may see thee, O God, in these turbulent days, when fear and doubt are mounting high. Give us broad visions, penetrating eyes, and power of endurance. Help us to work with renewed vigor for a warless world, for a better distribution of wealth, and for a brotherhood that transcends race or color. In the name and spirit of Jesus we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. You may be seated. Without objection, we will suspend the calling of the roll and ask the clerk to record the names of those members present throughout the meeting. Is there a motion for adoption of the minutes of the meeting from January 4th, 2022? I see a motion properly seconded. Without objection, the minutes of the meeting will stand approved as written. Mr. Clerk, any messages from the mayor?
There are no messages from the mayor.
All right. A few notes before we get started. We recognized yesterday, obviously, in this nation, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, with events and rallies all over the country. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. King, we just heard some. One of my favorite quotes is, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Think about that quote quite a bit these days, and remember Dr. King. Our thoughts go out tonight and have been going out to our own council member, Delisha Porterfield, who has been very ill. She was released today from the hospital. This is the latest news I've got. Here is her message from today. Thank you all for your thoughts and prayers. I was released from the hospital this afternoon. While I'm thankful to be home, there's still a road to recovery. I will be taking the next few days to rest and may be slow to respond as I focus on continuing to get better. Thank you all again. That was from Councilmember Porterfield. Want to thank, we obviously want her back sooner rather than later, and we want her to get well. A lot of thanks to Councilmember Suara, Councilmember Mendez, Murphy, Sepulveda, and I believe Councilmember Henderson, and our own Roseanne Hayes of our council office for stepping up and assisting while the council member has been sick. The last time we were here, I mentioned notice of board vacancies on the Community Oversight Board. We have 4 vacancies that we're filling at this time. Nothing going on tonight. I just want to remind you of the dates. Again, of these 4 vacancies, 2 members must be representatives of either a community organization or a private petition signed by 50 residents of Davidson County. One vacancy is going to be filled from nominations submitted by you council members, and one vacancy will be a person nominated by the mayor. Here are the deadlines. February 1st, 2022 is the deadline for nominations. Nominations must be complete and have to be in no later than 4:30 p.m. on February 1st, 2022. These forms can be obtained on the Community Oversight Board webpage. February 8th, 2022 is the deadline for nominee information. As you know, when people submit applications, they have to turn in this case, the Community Oversight Board information sheet to the Metro Council, or for the Metro Council, no later than 12 o'clock p.m. on February 8th, 2022. Again, those instructions are on the Community Oversight Board website. February 15th, 2022, appearance before Rules, Confirmations, and Public Elections Committee. So anybody who turns in all their forms must appear before that committee. And then on February 5th, the same date, assuming that we don't have a large number of nominees, we will then vote at the council meeting that night and get those individuals selected. So anyway, if there's any questions about, either call the council office or you can call the Metropolitan Clerk's office at 615-862-6770. Since our last meeting, now that some tornadoes ripped through parts of southeastern Florida, I know they're going through trying to repair. Obviously, we've had snowstorms all across the country, but they had tornadoes in Florida. Thoughts go out to the people of that area impacted by those storms. Thoughts also go out to the people of Colleyville, Texas. They endured an 11-hour standoff at their local synagogue before all hostages escaped. If you were watching those stories, it obviously comes at a time where anti-Semitism seems to be on the rise in this country. Changing to some good news, we wish the Tennessee Titans all the best as they face the Cincinnati Bengals in a divisional round matchup at Nissan Stadium this Saturday. A big, giant happy birthday to both Hannah Zeitlin and Danielle Godin of our staff who celebrated birthdays this past week. And if your right knee is bumping up against something, apparently there are new charging stations under your desk to the right of your knee. You can plug things in, including your phone, just letting you know what that is, okay? It was a gift I didn't know that we were giving you until just a little while ago. It's like the holidays. You all got a gift early. All right, we're now ready to proceed to elections and confirmations. I believe Councilmember Pulley, have you got the Rules Committee report? Councilmember Pulley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. The Rules, Elections, and Confirmation Committee reviewed the appointments of Community Oversight Board appointment Mr. Andrew Goddard, and that was deferred one meeting.
Okay.
We also reviewed Mr. Alfred DeGraffin Reed, Miss Angela Crane Jones, and Miss Emily Thaden, and the committee recommended their appointment 7 in favor, 0 against. We also reviewed the appointment of Mr. David Paget, and that was withdrawn. So that's the report from the Rules Committee.
All right, thank you. Council members,
I'd like to
make sure
move-
I get this right. Go through it, and then I'll ask for a motion. So the Mr. Andrew Goddard for the Community Oversight Board was deferred one meeting by rule.
That's correct.
Mr. Alfred DeGraffin Reed, Convention Center Authority was approved. Ms. Angela Crane Jones for the Farmers Market Board was approved. Ms. Emily Thaden for the Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency was approved. And the nomination of David Paget for the Solid Waste Region Board, that was withdrawn. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right, so entertain a motion to approve.
I would move the appointment of Mr. Alfred DeGraffin Reed, Ms. Crane Jones, and Ms. Thaden.
Okay, you've heard the motion. It's been properly seconded. Any discussion on the nominations and the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. You adopt. All right, so I think they're all here. If I can get them to stand up, Mr. Alfred Graffenreid, there he is. If I can get Ms. Angela Crane Jones for the Farmers Market Board and Ms. Emily Thaden for MDHA. You just got approved. Congratulations. Thank you for giving us your time and volunteering for your efforts. And we may have a quick meeting, so you're welcome to stay if you'd like. Okay. All right. So we also have a proposed amendment to Rule 28. It was passed out previously at the last meeting. Councilmember Pulley, did you all take this one up? Councilmember Pulley.
Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor, it was this proposed rule change to Rule 28 was heard by the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee voted 7 in favor, 0 against to indefinitely defer the request.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go to the proposal of the rules. Councilmember Evans, you're recognized on your rule proposal.
Yes, thank you. I did move in committee to indefinitely defer. Thank you very much.
All right. So this measure will be deferred indefinitely. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Evans. The public comment period is next. That's the time where members of the public are allowed to speak to us. It's my understanding that we had no one sign up this time, so we will proceed ahead. We will now move to resolutions on the consent agenda, and I'm going to go through the items that are on the consent agenda. If you know of something that needs to be bumped off as I go through, just let me know. We're starting on page 2. These are items, again, that are on the consent agenda tonight. First one up is RS 2022-1329 is on consent. 1330 on consent. 1331 on consent. 1332 on consent. 1333 on consent. 1334 on consent. 1335 on consent. 1336 on consent. 1337 on consent. 1338 on consent. 1339 on consent. 1340 on consent, 1341 on consent, 1342 on consent, 1343 on consent, 1344 on consent, 1345 on consent, 1346 on consent, 1349 on consent, 1350 on consent, 1351 on consent, and 1352 is on consent. Anything needs to be bumped off of the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, here we go. I'm going to read you the captions of the items on the consent resolution calendar. Item number 2, RS 2022-1329 by Council Members Allen, Welsh, Suara, and others. A resolution approving amendments 1 and 2 to appropriate grant funds from the Tennessee Housing Development Agency to the Metropolitan government through the Metropolitan Action Commission for LIHEAP services targeted toward the elderly, disabled, veterans, and households with children under the age of 6 years. RS 2022-1330, Allen, Welsh, Suara, and others. Resolution approving Amendment 1 to an appropriate supplemental benefit grant funds from THDA through the Metropolitan Action Commission for LIHEAP services targeted toward the elderly, disabled, veterans, and households with children under the age of 6 years. Item 4, RS 2022-1331 by Allen and Bradford. Resolution approving a contract between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County and U.S. eDirect to provide a point-of-sale system, including any maintenance and upgrades for the Department of Parks and Recreation. RS 2022-1332, Allen, Bradford, Gamble, and Hancock. Resolution accepting in-kind grant from Greenways for Nashville to the Metropolitan Government through the Board of Parks and Recreation to provide improvements to 7 trailheads on the Stones River Greenway and 3 trailheads on the Whites Creek Greenway. RS 2022-1333, Taylor, Allen, and others. Resolution accepting an in-kind grant from Creative Parks Nashville to the Metropolitan Government through the Board of Parks and Recreation to fund the purchase and installation of an historic marker near the front of the Centennial Art Center, acknowledge the facility as the former swimming pool. RS 2022-1334, Taylor, Allen, and others. Resolution accepting an in-kind grant from the Centennial Park Conservancy to the Metropolitan Government acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreation to fund the purchase and installation of flooring in the Parthenon's West Gallery and place signage at the Parthenon's entrance. RS 2022-1335, Taylor, Allen, Bradford, and Stiles. Resolution accepting a grant from the Centennial Park Conservancy to the Metropolitan Government through the Board of Parks and Recreation, provide funding for one part-time position in the Parthenon Museum store. RS 2022-1336 by Councilmember Allen. Resolution approving a joint funding agreement with the United States Department of the Interior, U.S. Geological Survey, to acquire approximately 525 square miles of current LIDAR derived high-resolution elevation data for Davidson County, Tennessee. RS 2022-1337 by Alan Evans and others. Resolution approving an application for an assistance for firefighters grant from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to the Metropolitan Government through the Metropolitan Nashville Fire Department to protect the health and safety of the public and first responder personnel against fire-related hazards. RS 2022-1338, Councilmember Allen, resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle a property damage claim of Maureen Slade against the Metropolitan Government, amount of $25,806.71. RS 2022-1339, Councilmember Allen, resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Department of Law to compromise and settle property damage claim of State Farm Insurance, a subrogee of Jordan Ripplemeyer against the Metropolitan Government in the amount of $26,791.08. RS 2022-1340, Allen, Evans, and Stiles. Resolution accepting an emergency management performance grant from the state of Tennessee through the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency of the Metropolitan Government through the Office of Emergency Management to subsidize the emergency management program. RS 2022-1341 by Councilmember Allen, Evans, Bradford, and Stiles. Resolution accepting a grant from the Friends of Metro Animal Care and Control to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Health to provide funding for families experiencing difficulty maintaining ownership of their pets. RS 2022-1342, Allen, Young, Toombs, and others. Resolution approving an application for a flood mitigation assistance grant for the state of Tennessee through TEMA to the Metropolitan Government acting through Metro Nashville Water and Sewer Services for flood mitigation. RS 2022-1343, Councilmembers Johnston, Allen, Young, Sawara. Resolution approving an application for a hazardous mitigation grant for the state of Tennessee through TEMA to the Metropolitan Government through the Water and Sewer Services Department for flood mitigation. RS 2022-1344, item number 17, Councilmember Johnston, Allen, Young, Sawara. Resolution approving an application for a hazard mitigation grant from the state of Tennessee through TEMA to the Metropolitan Government through the Metro Water and Sewer Services Department for flood mitigation. RS 2022-1345, item number 18, Hall, Allen, Young, and Sawara, resolution approving an application for a flood mitigation assistance grant through TEMA to the Metropolitan Government through the Metropolitan Nashville Water and Sewer Services Department for flood mitigation. RS 2022-1346, O'Connell, Withers, and Young, a resolution to amend ordinance number BL 2021-803, authorize the Metropolitan Government to abandon existing combination sewer and water mains, combination sewer manholes, fire hydrant assemblies, and easements, relocate a water main, accept a new combination sewer, sanitary sewer, and water mains, combination sewer manholes, inlet, sanitary sewer manholes, fire hydrant assemblies, and easements, and update map and parcel information for two properties now located at 138 12th Avenue North and 1102 Grundy Street. Let's see, RS 2022-1349. I didn't miss one. RS 2022-1349 by Council Members Murphy, Druffel, and Mendez. Resolution honoring the life of Veronica Strobel Siegenthaler. RS 2022-1350, Van Reeser, Q. Allen, Withers, and a host of others. Resolution honoring ESPN basketball analyst and Vanderbilt Commodore Caroline Peck. RS 2022-1351 by Vercher, Johnston, Nash, and a host of others. Resolution recognizes the 75th anniversary of the Tennessee State University Aristocratic Bands and commemorating their participation in the 2022 Tournament of Roses Parade. And RS 2022-1352 by Council Members O'Connell and Hurt. Resolution recognizing the 30th anniversary of the Tennessee Tribune. Those are the items on the consent calendar. Does anything need to be bumped off? Seeing none, I'm going to need some committee reports. All right. Budget and Finance, Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Budget and Finance reviewed a lot of bills and approved almost all of them, 7 in favor, 0 against. Those are RS 2022-1329, 1330, 1331, 1332, 1333, 1334, 1335, 1336, 1337, 1338, 1339, 1340, 1341, 1342, 1343, and we approved RS 2022-1344 and 1345, 8 in favor and 0 against.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Hancock, Government Operations.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Government Operations voted on Resolution 2022-1336, and again, this year, we remain consistent at a completely in agreement committee with 7 in favor, 0 against.
So you haven't had one negative vote yet in committee?
Not one this entire year.
All right, Ms. Darby, we need to check on that. Okay. Human Services, Councilmember Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Human Services considered RS 2022-1329 and 1330, and we approved 7 in favor, 0 against.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Withers, you've got one.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. The Planning and Zoning Committee considered RS 2022-1346 and voted in favor 12-4, 0 against.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Bradford, Public Facilities.
Yes, Vice Mayor, Public Facilities, Arts and Culture, RS 2022-1331, 1332, 1333, 1334 were approved 5 in favor, none against. RS 2022-1335 was approved 6 in favor, none against.
All right, thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Evans, did you have a quorum this time?
I did. I had a quorum.
Okay.
We had many quorums. Public Health and Safety met, and we discussed RS 2022-1337, RS 2022-1340, and 1341, and we approved 7 in favor, 0 against on all 3.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Young, Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. The Transportation Infrastructure Committee recommended approval 7 in favor, 0 against for resolutions 2022-1342, 1343, 1344, 1345, and 1346. And
right.
do you need a motion?
I need one more committee report.
Okay, well, then I will not move.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Pulley, you're recognized for
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Rules Committee.
Rules, Confirmations, and Public Elections considered RS 2020-1349 through 1349 through 1352, and recommended approval 7 in favor, 0 against. And with that, I would recommend approval of the consent agenda.
All right, Councilmember Pulley has moved the consent agenda. Councilmember Young seconds it. Any discussion on the consent agenda for resolutions? Seeing none, ready to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. You adopt. All right, let's go back and pick up the resolutions that were not on the consent. Item number 1, RS 2022-1328 by Councilmember Parker, Allen, Welsh, and Stiles. Resolution to approve the Second Amendment for a grant contract between constructing affordable housing approved by RS 2019-1861 between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Housing Trust Fund Commission, and Affordable Housing Resources. Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Is this for a committee report, or am I the lead sponsor on this?
You're the lead sponsor, and you've also got a committee report, and you've got a second committee report as well.
Great. So I'll ask for committee reports, and Affordable Housing was unable to consider this legislation due to lack of quorum.
Okay. Budget and Finance, Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Budget and Finance considered RS 2022-1328 and recommended approval, 6 in favor, 1 not voting.
Okay. Councilmember Parker, back to you. You've got a committee report in.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, so I would just move this for approval with a brief comment. It's my understanding.
So I got a motion properly seconded. Back to you.
It's my understanding that the purpose of this is to return some funds that Affordable Housing Resources will not be able to utilize largely due to the increase in construction costs, recent increase in construction costs. So appreciate them returning these funds and kind of adjusting their strategy to be able to continue their mission here, even as costs have risen. And with that, I'll renew my motion to approve.
Okay, so Councilmember Parker has moved for approval. It was properly seconded. Any other discussion? This is on a motion to approve RS 2022-1328. Seeing none, ready to vote. All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Resolution is adopted. Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Good. Okay. Bless you. Next one is RS 2022-1347 by Councilmember Evans. It's item number 20 on your list. It's a resolution requesting that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers keep Cook Recreation Area public. Councilmember Evans, you're recognized.
Committee reports, please.
Rules and confirmations, Councilmember Pulley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Rules and confirmation considered RS 2020-1347, and we also approved the recommended approval of the resolution as amended, 7 in favor, 0 against.
All right, Councilmember Pulley, while you're standing up, there's a late filed amendment on this one. Did
And
you all looked at the amendment and
we
was
did.
Okay.
We looked at the amendment and we entertained the late filed nature, and nobody had any objection to the late filed nature.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Pulley. Back to you, Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. I'd like to move the amendment, please.
Okay, this one is late file, suspension of the rules. You came and nobody had any objection to doing this.
That's correct.
Okay, so let's get this one in front of us. I think this one just came in today, right?
It did, yes.
Okay. All right, so Councilmember Evans has a late filed amendment. Go ahead and move to suspend the rules and we'll get this thing
I'd like to move to suspend the rules, please.
All right, so Councilmember Evans has moved to suspend the rules to get a late filed amendment that was filed today. You got it by email. Any objections to suspension of the rules? Seeing none, rules are suspended. You're on your late filed amendment.
Thank you. The amendment in question is an error. Use of the word imminent with an I instead of imminent with an E. And I know, former English teacher, and I used the wrong word. So that's the correction there.
It's pretty major. Okay.
And I appreciate my colleague who noticed the error immediately upon reading it and telling me about it.
All right, so did somebody want to request, who is the colleague that found it?
He'll make himself known, I'm sure.
All right, so you've heard, we have a late filed amendment before us that fixes a typo. Councilmember Evans moves the amendment, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Amendment's adopted. You're on your resolution as amended.
Thank you. So this resolution, I'll be very brief, but basically Cook Recreation Area is in District 12. It is almost at the Wilson County line on Percy Priest Lake. It's about 220 acres that was acquired by eminent domain to be able to construct Percy Priest Lake. And it was acquired to keep available for the public to be able to use, and also create a flood barrier for residents in that area. So in 2004, the RV area and some of the facilities were closed due to lack of use, and also infrastructure repairs are needed. So the Army Corps of Engineers is going through the process now of accepting requests from potential private-public partnerships to be able to have a proposal that's submitted to the Corps. So on January 10th, they've received their proposals, and residents are aligning because we really want to make sure that that is a space that's kept public, because as soon as we start transitioning this lake property into public-private partnerships, the fees start to go up, and it makes it inaccessible for residents. And right now, you can show up and pay a very low rate to be able to use some of the facilities there. So in the next 40 days, the Corps is going to be making a recommendation on which of the proposals that they'll choose to advance to phase 2, which will then have to comply with NEPA, which is the National Environmental Protection Act regulations, and then other regulations as well. So it's the request. We have zero control over the federal government, so it's encouraging them to consider the public when making their decision.
All right, so you've heard the explanation. What Councilmember Evans is moving is the passage of RS 2022-1347 as amended. Proper motioning and properly seconded. Any discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, ready to vote. All those in favor of the resolution as amended say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You adopt. Next one is item number 21, RS 2022-1348, resolution honoring the life of Dr. Yusuf Harris. It's by Councilmembers Taylor, Hurt, Porterfield, Vercher, and a host of other council members. Councilmember Taylor, you are recognized.
Thank you. Committee reports, please.
All right, Councilmember Pulley, Rules Committee.
Rules Committee considered the resolution and recommended approval as substituted, 7 in favor, 0 against.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Pulley. Back to you, Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you. I'd like to move the substitute.
Okay, so Councilmember Taylor has moved a substitute resolution, properly seconded. Back to you for an explanation of the substitute.
Thank you. The substitute is just a housekeeping substitute to change Dr. to Mr. in the recital.
Okay, so also corrects the typo. All right, so anyway, you've heard the explanation of the substitute resolution, properly seconded. Any discussion on the substitute resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the substitute resolution say aye. Opposed, no. Your substitute passes. You are now on RS 2022-1348 as substituted. Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you. Really briefly, Mr. Harris was the owner of a Keebalon bookstore in North Nashville, 28th and Jefferson Street. It's been there for over 30 years, and if you've been on Ed Temple, you've seen this store, the little yellow bookstore. It's a stronghold in the community, especially the black community, and keeps the culture and rich history and tradition of African Americans in Nashville alive. And so we really want to honor Mr. Harris, and we really want to also pay our respects to him and his family with the passing of him. Thank you. I move to approve.
All right, so you've heard the motion by Councilmember Taylor. It's to approve the resolution as substituted, properly seconded. Any discussion on the substitute resolution? Actually, we're voting on the resolution as substituted. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the resolution as substituted say aye. Opposed, no. The resolution as substitute passes. All right, we have two late filed resolutions. The first one is by Councilmember Parker. It is a resolution recognizing the East Nashville High School Eagles football team on their division championship. I assume that Councilmember Parker was at the game. Councilmember Parker, you're recognized on the resolution.
Unfortunately, I was not able to travel to Chattanooga for the finals, but I was at the division championship game, and it was extremely fun. I need to request a suspension of the rules for this resolution to be considered by this body.
Councilmember Pulley, did this one come before you all?
Yes, sir. It did come before us, and the Rules Committee had no objection to the late file nature of this resolution.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Pulley, Councilmember Parker, you're going to move to suspend the rules, correct?
Correct.
All right, so Councilmember Parker has moved to suspend the rules to get this matter before us tonight. Any objection to suspension of the rules? Seeing none, rules are suspended. You're on your resolution.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for allowing this to be late filed. I have become, in this process, been coordinating the timing of this, and I've become more familiar with Rule 12. So in the future, I should have these timely filed. But the really phenomenal season from the East Nashville Eagles, and I'd appreciate y'all's support on this. And with that, I'll move for approval.
All right, so you've heard Councilmember Parker move for approval, properly seconded. Any discussion on the resolution about East High, the Eagles football team? Councilmember Pulley, anything? Councilmember?
Do you want a committee report on the resolution itself?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
All right. The resolution itself was considered, and the Rules Committee recommended approval, 7 in favor, 0 against.
All right, thank you. Thank you for telling me that. Okay, so again, we're back on the motion to approve. Again, properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the late file resolution regarding East Nashville High School Eagles football team, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. You adopt. All right, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Parker. All right, we got one more late file resolution. This is by Councilmember Sawara. It's a resolution urging the Tennessee General Assembly to reject the redistricting plan splitting Davidson County into 3 congressional districts. Councilmember Sawara, you're recognized.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I would like to move for suspension of the rules because this bill was late filed because it's actually moving very fast. The House portion of this bill was considered today, and the Senate will be looking at the Senate part on Thursday. So that was why it was late filed. So with that, I want to move for the suspension of the rules.
All right, Councilmember Pulley, did this one come before the Rules Committee?
Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor, it did. The Rules Committee had no objection to the late filed nature of the resolution. We also considered the resolution itself and recommended approval 7 in favor, 0 against.
All right. All right. So the resolution is to urge, again, the Tennessee General Assembly to reject the redistricting plan, splitting Davidson County into 3 congressional districts. Councilmember Sawara has moved for suspension of the rules. Is there objection to suspension of the rules? See one hand. Please see one hand. So the rules are suspended. Councilmember Sawara, you're on your resolution.
Thank you. I'd like to move for approval with a brief comment.
All right, so Councilmember Sawara has moved for approval of this late resolution, properly seconded. Back on your resolution.
Thank you. Just as it says, this resolution is asking the Tennessee General Assembly to disregard the redistricting committee recommendation to split Davidson County into 3. This will be the first time it will be done in 230 years. And what it does is that it splits our voice in D.C., especially the voices of minority communities. As elected officials, as people that are representing Davidson County constituents, it doesn't matter what party you belong to. I think at the end of the day, we have to make sure that our interest is being represented in D.C. and we speak with a voice. And this split does not do that because it allows rural area to control our urban interests. And so with that, I want to move for approval. And I also want to recommend that anyone voted in the affirmative should be added and that the clerk sends a copy to the Tennessee General Assembly and to the governor.
All right, so Councilmember Sawara has moved for approval of the resolution and also mentioned anybody voting in the affirmative will be listed as a sponsor. Properly second. Discussion on the resolution. All right, seeing none, we are ready to vote on the late file resolution. All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? No. All right, so I've got 1 no, which is Councilmember Swope, and I have 3 abstentions, which is Hancock, Hall, Pulley, Johnston, okay, and Druffel, okay? Let me make sure I got this one right. Everybody else will be voting in the affirmative. 1 no vote, Councilmember Swope, and 3 abstentions. That's Councilmember Hancock, Hall, Pulley, and Druffel. So 4. Oh, no, you're listed as a no. I'm sorry. Let me try it one more time. I got to get this right. 2 noes, Councilmember Swope and Hall are noes. 3 abstentions. I've got Hancock, Pulley, and Druffel. Is that correct? Resolution passes with 2 noes and 3 abstentions. All right. Thank you, Councilmember Sawara. All right. We are now ready to go to bills on introduction, first reading. Any bill need to be considered separately? Councilmember Cash, you're recognized.
I'd like to pull 1073 off.
Okay. The first bill up. 1073 is pulled off of the initial review of bills on introduction, first reading. Anything else need to come off? Okay, seeing none, we'll consider all bills on introduction, first reading at one time except for BL 2022-1073. Is there a motion to adopt all remaining bills on?
So moved.
I got a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. All those other bills besides Bill 2022-1073 are passed on introduction, first reading. We are now ready to go back to item number 26, BL 2022-1073 by Councilmember Cash. Ordinance amending section 17.040.060, 17.08.030, 17.16.035, 17.16.170, and 17.20.030 of the Metropolitan Code to delete the daycare home use, create new daycare home small and daycare home large uses, and to update the requirements for opening a daycare home or daycare center use. Councilmember Cash, you're recognized.
Thanks. I want to pass this on first reading and defer until the first meeting in April.
To the first meeting in April. Okay, so the motion is to pass tonight and defer to the first meeting in April?
Yes.
That's when it would be on second reading.
Correct.
All right,
Correct.
That's the motion, properly seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Again, pass tonight on first reading and defer second reading on this bill to the first meeting in April. Any discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Thank you, Councilmember Cash. All right. All right, we are now ready for bills on second reading. There's actually only one. It is item number 41. It is Bill 2021-961 by Councilmembers Johnston, Pulley, Nash, Rutherford, and others. It's an ordinance amending section 13.08.080 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws pertaining to the use of license plate scanner technology in the public rights-of-way. Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Committee reports, please.
All right, I got transportation. Councilmember Young.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. You want me to just give you the run-through of everything that came before us on this? Because there were several things. Or
You can do whatever you want.
How do we want to
but that would
shuffle
probably
the
be
cards?
helpful.
All right.
Okay.
Well, for BL 2021-961, there were several amendments. The proposed Amendment 1 by Councilmember Benedict was recommended, or was not recommended, 3 in favor, 5 against recommendation. Amendment 2 by Councilmember Benedict was not recommended, 1 in favor, 5 against, 2 abstaining. Amendment 3 by Councilmember Nash was recommended for approval, 5 in favor, 3 against. And the late amendment by Councilmember Johnston was recommended 9 in favor, 0 against. Some of those totals don't add up to the same. That's because we had people joining us as we were discussing. And that is, and the bill as amended was recommended 8 in favor, 2 against, 0 abstaining.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Young. All right, Public Health and Safety, Councilmember Evans.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Proposed Amendment 1, we did not hear. Amendment 2, the combined amendment with Councilwoman Benedict and Nash, we had 6 in favor, 2 against. Amendment 3, we understood from Councilman Nash was going to be withdrawn. The late amendment from Councilwoman Johnston was 8 in favor, 0 against. And then the bill as amended was 8 in favor, 0 against.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Evans. I'm just trying to make sure I got everything straight. Councilmember Johnston, you're on your bill. BL 2021-961.
Thank you. We probably need to move the individual amendments. So do we want to go in order and have each sponsor move their amendment?
Why don't you go ahead and, well, you can move the bill and I'll get it seconded and then we'll start going through the amendments if you'd like to do that.
Okay, I'll move the bill, please.
Okay, so Councilmember Johnston has moved the bill, BL 2021-961, for passage on second reading. Properly seconded. Back to you, Councilmember Johnston, and if you want, we can go through the amendments.
Yes, let's go through the amendments first, I think.
All right, so Councilmember Johnston wants to go. We have 3 amendments and then a late filed amendment, so we'll go through them one at a time. And if you want, I'll call up amendment number 1 by Councilmember Benedict. You're recognized on the First Amendment.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Trying to find my right file. My apologies here. So, okay, thank you again, Vice Mayor. So this amendment actually states that wherever the cameras are installed, that sign, a standard NDOT spec sign that they use through national standards would be placed where those LPR cameras are affixed. And so the intent there is to say, you know, to let people know that those cameras are in place. This afternoon, this evening, a couple of concerns have come up, and I think it's just standard NDOT type policy, but certainly would be glad to flesh this out prior to third reading. But I already am aware that the plan would be to, let's just hypothetically say there are 20 cameras in a 1 mile stretch. The plan would be for one sign to be, I'm sorry, in a 2 mile stretch, let's just say. There's not going to be a sign at every single camera in that particular case. There's going to be signs throughout the area or a sign on the beginning or the end, depending on the distance, much like how NDOT manages signs today. So I think there were concerns earlier tonight about how signs might be messy and cluttery and not noticeable. But mainly, the purpose of this amendment really was about addressing the public's concerns. They continue to be interested in and actually demanding transparency in policing and even transparency in government overall. We've never seen a higher distrust of government in our country's, in this generation's history anyway. And so for us to do anything other than to be completely transparent, including letting our constituents, letting Nashvillians know when we're observing them, you know, for us to do anything to go around that, I fear could be viewed as tone deaf. You know, we're listening to the public. They don't have the trust in government as they like. They don't have the trust in policing that we want them to have. I think we need to address that. MNPD has advised me that the cameras will be lit with a blue light, and I personally see cameras around with a blue light, but I don't know what that means. I personally don't know what it means when there's a camera with a blue light on. I don't know if it's looking at me for a red light camera. I don't know what it's doing. And so when we continue to add these, again, we're not letting people know what they're there for. And so this transparency piece is really what's important to me. And looking at the bill, the sponsor's bill says, and this is, I think, important, that we don't have anything to hide. The data that'll be collected will be for assisting in missing persons cases, including amber and silver alerts, operating a smart parking or curb management program, detecting traffic or parking offenses, and investigating and prosecuting felony offenses and criminal offenses associated with violent crimes. So for that, I don't see a reason why we should hide, and I think that the public deserves transparency from us, and we should let them know that we're taking a look at what they're doing as they go through these. I think we want to let people know that we're looking at them for parking offenses. I think we want to deter felons from taking advantage of areas. Whoa, sorry. I ran out of time, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it there. I really want to reiterate the point that the public deserves transparency from us, and I ask for your support for this amendment.
All right,
Thank
before
you.
you sit down, you want to move this amendment?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Councilmember Benedict has moved amendment number 1, properly seconded for discussion. So I've got a lot of people in the queue, but I don't know if you want to speak on this amendment or on the bill. So if you want to speak on this amendment by Councilmember Benedict, please raise your hand. Okay. All right, Councilmember Nash, you're recognized on amendment number 1.
At least in committee, the impression was given that for every camera, there'd be a sign. And I want the public to be made aware. I don't mind some signage, but I think it should be done much more like you might see along the interstate. Speeds are enforced through radar, or speeds are enforced through aircraft watching, and not necessarily a sign that, oh, here's a car with a radar gun that's going to be looking at you. It gives the thugs or criminals an opportunity to say, ooh, I'm just going to turn right here and go around the block, and we won't have to worry about that camera. So I hope, I'm going to vote no on this one, but I have no problem with us coming back with a bill that I think would be better, more clear as to notifying folks, but not necessarily highlighting every camera.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you. I don't, the nature of these cameras is not to hide them at all. In fact, part of the benefit of having them is knowing that they're there, and the fact that that in and of itself deters crime, which is my goal, is to stop the crime from happening in the first place. They do have blue lights. I worry a little bit. I'm not against transparency. I mean, I don't think anybody in this room is against that and letting people know that the technology would be in use. I think there's a lot of question about what it would cost, what cameras are, because I think it does say it would be on every camera. And then when we're talking about parking enforcement, so is it on every single parking meter? How do we, I just think there's a lot of ambiguity to it right now. Again, I don't object to the thought of it. I just think it probably should be more defined as to where they go, and how much it's, the implications of it. I just think it's a little bit ambiguous at this point. I will be voting no, but would be open to later on adding signage somewhere.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Johnston. Councilmember Rosenberg, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's worth noting that under state law, all red light cameras need to have signs for the same reason Councilmember Benedict described having this signage for that transparency. And also, there is no after tonight. The bill is unamendable after, if it were to pass tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to be heard? We're on amendment number 1 by Councilmember Benedict. Anybody else want to be heard? Councilmember Benedict is walking back to her chair. Councilmember Benedict, no one else is in the queue. I'm happy to come back to you if you want to say something.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I think it's, I actually had gone up to ask Assistant Director Zeitlin, who had helped me with this amendment, to get clarification about the way that the amendment reads relative to an individual sign per camera, as that seems to be what what I think the major concern is that we just heard. And so I would like her opinion, or our new director's opinion, in regards to how that's worded in the amendment, and then from there, I believe, anyway, thank you.
Ms. Darby?
The legislation just says that the signage shall be placed by any fixed LPR technology, and to give notice to the public of any use of such technology at a given location. So conceivably, the word by is pretty, it could be pretty broad, so that the signage could be located near the sign. It doesn't, near the LPR, it doesn't have to be on the LPR.
Councilmember Benedict.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So to clarify, do we have regulation today about where speed limit signs go? Does it say by, or, and this might be more a pretty technical NDOT question, or certainly is more of a, I'm looking at things that might be codified as it relates to where we place signs.
That would be a question we'd have to run past NDOT.
Yeah. I mean,
if
that's the concern, I think that this is pretty clear, then that we have a well-established practice with NDOT of allowing them to put signs where they view they're appropriate, where there's not too many of them, but where they view they're appropriate. And so this legislation clearly says, well, I think it's clear, says that these signs will be placed by the technology. And as I said in the initial presentation of the amendment, my expectation would be that it's not just a one sign, hey, welcome to the neighborhood, there's LPR technology here, but rather, but also that if there's 20 cameras in a 10-mile, or in a 2-mile stretch, that we're not putting them at every single one. I think that this legislation says that, and so once again, I'd like to renew my motion for approval. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
All right, so let me tell you where we are. Councilmember Benedict has moved amendment number 1. It's properly seconded. Anybody else want to talk about this one? Just checking. All right, we are ready to vote. We'll try it by voice vote. If not, if it's not clear, then we'll go over to the machine. We are voting on Councilmember Benedict's motion to approve amendment number 1 to BL 2021-961. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We're on the machine. All right. Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, tell me when you're ready. We are ready. Okay, so what we're doing is we're voting on Councilmember Benedict's motion to approve amendment number 1. If you're for amendment number 1, you'll vote yes. If you're against it, you'll vote no. Mr. Clerk, open up the machines. Ready? Close the machines, Mr. Clerk. Take the vote. So I've got ayes 19, noes 17. The amendment passes. All right. So amendment number 1 goes on the bill. We're ready for amendment number 2 by Councilmember Benedict. You're recognized.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Pending the late resolution that's been filed, I guess I have a question procedurally. This amendment and Councilmember Nash also had an amendment. We, during committee, after committee, we decided to combine those and we have a late filed amendment that I want to make sure we don't have objections for. So I don't know, would we be able to take that late filed objection prior to amendments 2 and 3? And that way, I think Councilmember Nash, as he did in committee, wants to withdraw that, and I also would withdraw mine as well.
Yeah. So unless there's an objection, what we would do is take amendment number 2 and I believe amendment number 3, and then roll them underneath the late filed amendment that's the combination of your 2. And then, depending on what happens with the late filed amendment, then we'd come back to that, and you can do whatever you want to. Is that what you'd like to do?
Yeah, I'd like to withdraw number 2, please.
No, you
I'm
don't.
sorry.
I'm
I'm sorry. I'm so confused. You confused me, Vice Mayor.
So here's what you would do. You would you can move the late filed amendment to be heard right now.
Got it.
Okay?
I move that. Thank you.
And then the other ones just stay in place, and they'll be heard after this one. So Councilmember Benedict has moved the late filed amendment that is co-sponsored by Councilmember Benedict and Councilmember Nash. She has moved that be heard right now. Properly seconded. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. We are now on a late filed amendment by Councilmember, let me pull it up. Over here. I'm just checking to see whose name is first. Oh, you are. Councilmember Benedict and Councilmember Nash. All right, so this is a late filed amendment that was sent out by email, I believe, today. It would have gone to the Rules Committee, but I'm going to go to Councilmember Benedict first. What do you want to do with your late filed amendment?
I'd like to move it, please, for approval.
Let's get we're going to have to suspend the rules to get it. So I'm going to go to Councilmember Pulley. It went to Rules Committee. What happened?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. It did come before the Rules Committee, and no one on the committee had any objection to the late filed nature of the amendment.
Okay. Now, Councilmember Benedict, back to you. What you're going to do is move to suspend the rules.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and I appreciate your grace through this procedure tonight. I'd like to move to suspend the rules.
All right. So Councilmember Benedict has moved to suspend the rules to get this late filed amendment before us tonight. Is there any objection to suspending the rules to get this matter before us tonight? I can't even see. I'm looking for hands. Seeing none, rules are suspended. You're on your late filed amendment.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So the late filed amendment is a compromise bill between the sponsor of amendment number 3, Councilmember Nash, and my amendment number 2. My amendment would have not allowed any non-governmental organization grants for any LPR equipment, services, software, anything like that throughout, should Bill 961 pass. So Councilmember Nash's amendment number 3 offered similar language, except that his goal was to make sure that the council had the ability to approve any donations, any grants from any non-governmental organization by resolution, council approval by resolution, and that was for anything of any cost at all. So there was no low threshold on that, 1 penny. We decided that what the compromise is that we will not allow any donations from any grants from any non-governmental organization for the pilot period. And then once the pilot period is over, NGO donations will be allowed, but only upon resolution, approval of resolution by the council. So we really have done a great job, and I very much appreciate Councilmember Nash and, of course, the bill's sponsor, Councilmember Johnston, as well, in their work to come to this compromise on this amendment. And with that, I appreciate everybody's support. I once again renew my motion for approval. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
So Councilmember Benedict is moving approval of, right now it would be considered amendment number 2, and properly seconded by Councilmember Nash. Okay. Discussion on the amendment. Councilmember Pooley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I have probably a question for either Ms. Darby or the administration. Because we're talking about, if this bill passes, we're talking about a 6-month pilot. And there's been some discussion that the vendors that we could potentially use for these LPR cameras may be willing to let us use cameras during this 6-month period, possibly. And would this prohibit that from being able to happen and force us to have to purchase equipment that we potentially would only be using for 6 months?
Darby, do you know? Or are you going to give it to the administration?
I don't have an answer for that. It depends on the contract.
All right. Mr. Jameson? Mr. Jameson has destroyed Metro Council property. Mr. Jameson, if you want, you can just use the microphone up here. Councilmember.
Our understanding of the compromise, Amendment 2 and 3 version is that there would, during the pilot program, be a prohibition on all private donations, so that would exclude the vendor's submission of those devices for the 6-month period, but not after the 6-month period.
Councilmember Pulley?
So to be clear, they would not be able to allow us to use equipment during the 6-month period.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. We are on Councilmember Benedict's motion to approve amendment number 2. Discussion, Councilmember Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is an important amendment because it gives us a little bit oversight over what company comes in. At least one of the companies that has expressed interest in making money in Nashville is involved in a very robust data sharing agreement with ICE in the billions of records. And without an amendment that gives council oversight on where this comes from, we have no idea where we're going to end up.
Thank you, Councilmember Rosenberg. Councilmember Johnston.
This actually has caught me off guard because we came up with this. I don't know, and maybe Council Lady Benedict had this thought process about the vendors, because I think with the 6-month pilot, to purchase however many cameras for a 6-month pilot and then have the risk of the program not continuing after that, we've expended a lot of money. And so I think it was sort of always, well, I had always thought that it would be the procurement process would go through the way that it always does, and they would choose the best vendor, for our needs. And valid point, because I understand what Councilman Rosenberg is talking about, and I'm not interested in that either. So I'm just wondering if there's any way we can get around not having to expend that amount of money for a 6-month pilot that could possibly not, I mean, I guess Mr. Jameson needs some help on that. And maybe even a question to Council Lady Benedict, if that was her intent. I think we might be putting ourselves in a bind, even though we were trying to do the right thing.
Ms. Darby, you recognize?
I'll just jump in here. There's a possibility, depending on the contract process, but there's a possibility to lease the equipment for that 6-month period.
Okay, so we have a workaround. I'm good with it. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Nash, you're recognized.
Ms. Darby took care of my question.
Okay. All right, so we are again on amendment number 2 by Councilmember Benedict and Nash. Further discussion. All right, we are ready to vote. We are on amendment number 2, Benedict and Nash. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's pretty good. The ayes have it. So amendment number 2 goes on the bill. We are now on, okay, so now we're on amendment number 2, amendment number 3. It just moved down the list by Councilmember Benedict. This is your original amendment number 2.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'd like to withdraw the amendment.
Okay, so amendment number 3 now by Councilmember Benedict is withdrawn. Amendment number 4 by Councilmember Nash, you're next.
Likewise, thank you, Vice Mayor, and I withdraw.
Okay, so amendment number 4, which is listed in your packet as amendment number 3, is withdrawn. So we have adopted amendment number 1 and amendment number 2. Again, amendment number 2 is Benedict and Nash's together. Councilmember Johnston, there is one more amendment sitting in this packet. Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. This amendment, is offered in response to a concern that came out of our Friday special LPR committee meeting, and it's late filed, obviously, because the meeting happened on Friday. But I did want to address that concern, so I'll need to suspend the rules.
All right, did this one, Councilmember Pulley, did this one come before rules?
Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor, it did, and no one on the Rules Committee had any objection to the late nature of the filing.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Pulley. So, Councilmember Johnston, you're asking for a suspension of rules to get this one before us.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this was also late filed, and it would have been, I think, sent through email. Is there objection to suspension of rules to get this matter before us? 1, 2, so 3. So there is enough objection, so it cannot be heard tonight. Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we are now back on the bill. This is BL 2021-961 with 2 amendments on it. I believe no more amendments. That's it. So, Councilmember Johnston, you are on BL 2021-961 with 2 amendments on it. You're recognized.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. 3,006. That is the number of vehicles that were stolen in Davidson County in 2021. 66. That's the number of vehicles that were stolen in the first week alone in Davidson County in 2022. An innocent 60-year-old man was murdered this past Saturday here in Nashville. An arrest was made in that case in less than 24 hours because of LPRs in Cobb County, Georgia. An elderly man with dementia in Knoxville was reported missing at 8:15 p.m. on January the 11th. He was located an hour and 15 minutes later by LPR technology and escorted safely home. We've been discussing the topic of LPRs for quite some time now, well over a year. We've collaborated very successfully in multiple committee meetings, community meetings, a town hall, meetings with stakeholders and constituents, and have addressed their concerns through multiple amendments. We've limited approved uses to investigating felonies and violent crimes, stolen vehicles and plates, amber and silver alerts, and parking enforcement. We've prohibited uses for things such as surveillance, repossession, determination of insurance and valid driver's license, to name a few. We've reduced data retention from 30 days to 10 days. We've limited placement to just major and collector streets and implemented equity of placement among the 4 quadrants of the county. There is a robust privacy policy limiting access to the database to 10 people and having an audit log of who searches it, when, and why. There are several reporting requirements, a 2-step data verification policy, and a restrictive sharing policy. We removed LPR data from the state's open records law, and we crafted this as a 6-month pilot to make sure this is right for Davidson County. I could go on, but I will spare you. We have done an incredible job as a council working to create a strong, well thought out policy around the usage of LPRs to address concerns brought forth, and I want to thank everyone for their involvement in this process. We've worked to address all concerns, and we've gotten as close as we're going to get without rendering this tool useless. I understand that there are some council members that are still against the use of LPRs, and I respect their position. They are philosophically against them. I just disagree. We are surrounded by municipalities that use this technology very successfully. They're actually helping solve our crimes. It's our job as a government to protect our citizens and do whatever we can to keep them safe. This is a proven tool. It's widely used in Middle Tennessee and across the country. This is a robust, restrictive, and thoughtful policy. This will make Nashville a safer place, and I encourage you all to support this very important legislation.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Johnston. So Councilmember Johnston you're moving BL 2021-961 as amended, properly seconded. Okay, so now we have discussion on the motion to adopt on second reading. Councilmember O'Connell, you're first in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Rosenberg for patiently and deliberatively leading an important discussion. We raised this issue last term, and I think where we've gotten to as we've had this conversation is a spot where nothing has fundamentally changed about the underlying nature of the conversation. Fundamentally, this question of passage of this bill is whether you are comfortable with the government tracking your motion by taking pictures of your car and possibly you, and whether we as a body are comfortable imposing that tracking on the citizenry of Nashville. I am personally not comfortable with that. I know there are some restrictions in this, but even those restrictions are not sufficient to maintain the privacy that I think is most appropriate. And I think we would be better off continuing to wait for Councilmember Rosenberg's bill to rematerialize and have the discussion with its more reasonable basis rather than passing this. I encourage colleagues to oppose this, and I would like to request a roll call vote. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Mendes, you're recognized.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Like Council Member Johnston, I appreciate that there are people on different sides of this, and everybody has worked hard on it. I'm going to vote no tonight. This is not amendable on third reading, so it's not changing. We've talked about it for a long time. As drafted, it's too broad. Frankly, it reads like 25 people wrote it. It's hard to get through. There's been substantive changes that got proposed at 3:19 this afternoon to us. If those changes are worth talking about, we should talk about them more seriously than 3 hours notice and defer the bill. There are too many questions. The Community Oversight Board has sent us a letter saying they're opposed to this. The ACLU has said they prefer different legislation. For me, given the fact that we're talking about individual rights here, it is not true that we should do, quote, whatever we can to protect people. We should do whatever we can within the framework of protecting individual rights under the U.S. Constitution and the state of Tennessee's Constitution. Here, there's too much risk of infringing individual rights to be worth the benefit from what's proposed. Just another small example is if you read the fine print of the bill, the audit trail that gets talked about says it may or may not be shared with anybody outside of MNPD, depending on what state and federal law says. So even as it's being passed, no way for anybody in this room to know whether the audit trail will ever get shared with anybody outside of MNPD. Maybe the future in this country, in this city, is going to be what I would consider a dystopian situation where all our movements, mine, yours, everybody's, are tracked by multiple government agencies with technology in real time. But if that's going to be the future, it's going to happen without my vote. I think this, despite everybody's best efforts, is not something that I can support. It's not going to change on third reading. Let's just vote no on it now. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Mendes. Pursuant to Rule 34, there's a limitation on if a council member has already spoken, she'll speak no more than once on the same subject. But we've got some people who have signed up, and because they haven't spoken on this matter, I'm going to go ahead and let them go through the ranks. Councilman Rosenberg?
Thank you, Mr. President. Since those were on a different motion, does that not?
Well, so people were speaking on the amendments. This is on the motion to pass this bill as a whole with the amendment. That's why I'm just going to go through. And you're on there. That's why.
Got it. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay. So the next one is Councilmember Pulley, and then Councilman Rosenberg will follow Councilmember Pulley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I think one thing that we all agree on, I very much appreciate everyone having the right to their opinion on this and their positions. I very much respect my opponents. I obviously fall on the side of supporting this bill. I do want to point out a couple of things. I think Councilmember Johnson did a very good job of covering the benefits of the LPR cameras. I do want to emphasize that this is a 6-month pilot. That's it. In the end of a 6-month period, when these are being evaluated by our police department and the council, it will come back to us and we will review it, and it will require council action to move forward past a 6-month pilot. I think really what we're talking about is how we view public safety. This technology is a snapshot of a license plate in a vehicle. That's colorblind. You know, there's been a lot of talk about misuse of this technology. I hear talk about tracking the motion of individuals, and the examples, quite frankly, that have been provided by people who are opponents of this bill just really don't compel me or pass muster at all. We're talking about, we have there's almost 80 agencies in the state of Tennessee who have LPR technology currently and use this technology. City of Atlanta uses it. They're all over Georgia, Georgia Highway Patrol, and there are probably, I would say in the city of Atlanta alone, about 100 million scans annually. Yet we have heard nothing to support any misuse coming out of the cities around us. There are plenty of examples of LPR technology of how it works for us and how we catch criminals. We just picked up a homicide subject through an LPR hit in Cobb County, Georgia, of a murder that occurred in Nashville. So there are an awful lot of reasons to support this, and quite honestly, I certainly side on that side of public safety, and I would recommend that you all support this.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Pulley. Councilmember Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think a lot of the conversation that's happened around this has been if you're for LPRs, you vote for this bill, and if you're against LPRs, you vote against this bill. And I think that that's not true, and also has led to kind of some almost cartoonish arguments from outside of this room about the way that you need to vote on it, and has led to some pressure from interesting quarters that are trying to frame it in that way. And we need to be more thoughtful than to accept that or acknowledge it as fact. There's an opportunity to pass, if you are somebody who's comfortable with the idea of LPRs, a sensible and well-crafted policy that allows the council and the city to move into that space and see how they work and make a decision from then about whether we want to move further or rein it in or stay where we are. This bill is not it. The bill is a mess to try to read. It's very difficult to go through. There has been one community meeting on it where we accepted any community engagement on it through all this time. So while it's been in front of us for a while, it's mostly been sitting on a shelf. The issues also stem to the idea that because it's a pilot, we can just go on with it. Because the way a program is run while it's a limited pilot does not necessarily reflect the way it's going to be run once it's a permanent policy without that threat that it might not be continued if it isn't the way that the council prefers it be run. I think that we've got the chance to do something. We have a bill pending, and while I'm not comfortable with LPRs because of the slippery slope, I do believe that I've made the commitment that I want to bring a bill to this body that takes into account both the desires of folks who really like LPRs and the concerns of people who are deeply skeptical of them. And if we can get this bill out of the way, I think that we've really got the opportunity to do that. This bill does not add the limitations that are claimed to it. It makes some head fakes towards them, and I appreciate those, but down to the fact that it says facial recognition isn't allowed, but doesn't prohibit photographing the car on all sides and its occupants and storing those photos, or a range of other uses throughout. It's just, this is not the way to do it. This is not a thoughtful, well-crafted piece of legislation that should go into the Metropolitan Code of Ordinances. Let's get it right. Please vote no tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Rosenberg. Councilmember Young, you're recognized.
Previous question.
All right, so Councilmember Young has called the previous question. We are not voting on the measure on second reading. We're just simply voting on the previous question. All those in favor of the previous question say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Missing 4. Okay. So I can't tell. So previous question requires 2/3 of those voting to approve. So we're on the board. Mr. Clerk? So before you open up the machines, we're trying to make sure, I believe, you think we have 36 members? All right, so we have 35 members voting. Okay, Mr. Clerk, again, we are voting on the previous question. It's got to have 2/3. Mr. Clerk, open up the machines, just on the previous question. Now 36. Okay. I'm doing it right now. Have to have 24. All right, we're ready? Mr. Clerk, close machines, take the vote. Ayes 20, it needed 24, no 16. We're still on the bill. Okay, thanks, Mr. Clerk. All right. All right. Councilmember Stiles, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. I'm not going to repeat many of the good points that have been made by my co-sponsors. Thank you, Councilmember Johnston, for enumerating the ways in which this bill protects citizens' rights and not infringing upon them. I did want to share, for those of you that were unable to attend the town hall that was at the public library back in November, we did hear from an individual who wanted his story shared tonight. His name is Ernest Baldwin, and he was shot November 20th 3 times, and he almost died. There was someone that was on site that took a picture of the assailant's car as it was driving away, and it is that picture that was used by the DA to capture those individuals. And while that doesn't change the fact that that individual was shot, he had some solace in knowing that the people that did this to him were captured. And that's what we need to think about when we're thinking about this equipment. This will help our officers be able to handle violent crimes, Amber Alerts, Silver Alerts. This is a tool that is a benefit. Much time has been spent since October of 2020. Yes, when I first brought a bill forth to talk about license plate readers. And there are a lot of protections in here that are a result of that initial legislation. Please consider this when you're deciding what you want to vote on. I think this bill is very comprehensive. Many people have worked together to bring this forth. And again, this is a 6-month pilot, 6 months. The data that we receive from this, we will have an opportunity to make sound decisions. If this doesn't work, we have the opportunity to let it end. But if it does work, we need to implement it, because right now we are a black hole amongst municipalities where people can run through with stolen vehicles and have no accountability. Let's change that. Let's show that Nashville can come up and be with the times as other cities have and really be effective in fighting crime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Stiles. Councilmember Johnston, you're next, but you've already spoken on the bill, so I got to come back to you. Councilmember Nash, on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. You know, I ran for the council because we had 2 police officers that were here on council previous that were rolling off, and I thought it was important, especially given some of the tensions between police and community. It was important to have a voice of somebody who spent some time in law enforcement and worked with community, and I'm proud of that service, and I'm proud of the men and women of this police department and how they've served this community over the years. Much of the tensions that were raised outside this community, and as things become nationalized anymore. And I found some of the rhetoric around this so disappointing as a person who served here. It's heartbreaking to some degree to hear some of the comments. We could abuse DNA, but I don't think anybody in this room would say, well, DNA, you're going to plant it somewhere and police are going to misuse it. We have cleared many, many more people with DNA, as many as convicted. Likewise, fingerprints years ago. And I said, well, we can misuse fingerprints. But generally, these are considered great tools. And we have the chance now with new developing technology here to add another tool of similar. It won't solve every crime, but it will be a good tool in solving many that I think are needed. The safeguards are in this bill. My concern with Councilmember Rosenberg's bill is it's so limited at this point that it really sets up the police department or anybody testing LPRs for failure. The retention period is way too short to allow it to be used successfully in investigations, not just a hit on a plate. So I ask you to vote for this bill. It is time. It's a technology whose time has come, and it will protect our citizens' rights and protect them and their safety.
Thank you, Councilmember Nash. Councilmember Sepulveda.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I guess I want to start off by reiterating Councilmember Rosenberg's point. We've only had one countywide community meeting. We've had several meetings amongst ourselves where we invite people to come speak, but we've only reached out to the community as a whole one time, and that's because Councilmember Rosenberg asked for it. I really don't know what imaginary timeline we're on to push this legislation forward without having more of a discussion. I don't understand what the rush is. We're talking about people's privacy. We're talking about people's lives. When we gather so much information as to the whereabouts of people, we can create a very intimate picture of where people go, when they go, what they're doing. And we got to ask ourselves what the price is that we're willing to pay. Is one family being picked up by ICE a fair price to pay? Is a black, brown, or immigrant family being mistakenly handcuffed and put on the ground a fair price to pay? Because it's exactly what other cities have deemed to be livable collateral damage, because that has happened in several other cities. I want to point out that we started this conversation based on drag racing, and it's, as you could see by this legislation, it's been broadened. We talk about, you know, where people are going. We're taking pictures of license plate, and we're talking about this becoming a slippery slope. Then it's what church they go to. Are they gay or not? And it is possible because this legislation is an example of how much of a slippery slope it was. We started with drag racing. Now we've expanded the use of LPRs. I know that it's a 6-month pilot, but in those 6 months, we are talking about collecting data on people. We're talking about infringing on their privacy. Those 6 months can mean life or death if there is a mistake. And so I want us to consider that we don't have to vote on this today, that we can continue to work on this, and that we can talk to the community. We don't have to pass something, you know, at the next meeting. We set the timeline. So I don't understand what we gain from not listening.
Councilmember Parker, you recognize.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I'm going to be careful to avoid things that others have already said, although I agree with a lot of what's been said. I did watch the special committee meeting from Friday, I believe it was. And in the discussion there, it was brought up that the authors of this legislation had attempted to find ways to insulate this data from ICE, from federal immigration authorities. And it was essentially found by legal counsel that there was really no way to do that. That they have sort of subpoena powers that would override anything that we did at our level. And so, you know, my response to that reality, if we really can't find a way, is not to just throw up your hands and say, well, that's a risk that we're willing to put on our neighbors. You know, that's a risk that we're willing to take as a majority white body. I say you just don't build that infrastructure to begin with. You do not build the infrastructure that generates the data that particular organization can use to target our neighbors. And so unless we can find a way around that issue, unless we can find a way to ensure that this data will not be used to target our neighbors, I'm going to be a no on this. And I would prefer that this were deferred today, but I'm not going to move it for deferral. I'm just going to be a no if we put it up to a vote.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Gamble, you recognize.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just a few clarifications. There have been a minimum of 5 countywide meetings to discuss this LPR bill or the LPR use since we started discussing it over a year ago. In addition, and that's just the 5 that we've had as a council. That's not including meetings, community meetings that individual council members have had in their districts with their constituents about this. We have heard a lot of assertions about how this LPR data would be used, but the facts are that this would only be used for investigating and prosecuting felony offenses, violent crimes, stolen vehicles, smart parking offenses, and missing person cases, amber and silver alerts. It would not be used to track people, to find their whereabouts, and the other assertions that have been made. Also, there is no facial recognition with this technology. It is simply identifying a license plate number that comes from a national database. Once a crime has been committed and the license plate has been identified in that crime, that license plate goes into a national database, and only that license plate would be pulled if there was a crime committed. So any other license plate images that are captured, the data is not used unless that license plate was involved in a crime and is listed on a national database as such. Also, in having all of these meetings, at least 5 that we had as a group, we heard from the community about concerns about privacy and possible discrimination. those concerns were addressed in this bill by having a two-step verification process, by limiting the use of the cameras, by limiting the retention of the data. So a lot of the concerns that we heard over the past year came as a result of those meetings, and that information or those safeguards have been added to the bill to address that. So I just wanted to make sure that we are in discussion today, making sure that we're hearing the facts about how the data will be used and how the conversation with the community has been had over the past year in discussing this. And for those reasons, I'm supporting the bill. I know that there's another bill that is being considered. That bill restricts the use so much that it wouldn't be more than what we're already doing. So for those reasons, I support. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Gamble. Councilmember Hancock.
I'd like to call the question.
Okay, so Councilmember Hancock has called the previous question. We're going to try again, just on the previous question. We're not voting on the bill. Previous question, all those in favor of the previous question say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Previous question, I believe, prevails. Okay. All right, so we are now voting on Bill 2021-961 as amended. This has been approved. It's a motion that was made by Councilmember Johnston. It's been properly seconded, amended twice. Mr. Clerk, I think we're going to have to go on the board. There was a roll call requested by Councilmember O'Connell. All right, so we are now voting on the bill. This is on second reading, Bill 2021-961 as amended. If you are for the bill on second reading, you vote yes. If you're against it, you'd vote no. Mr. Clerk, open up the machines. All votes in. We're voting. All right, Mr. Clerk, close the machines. Take the vote. Oh, well, we're on the. Bill passes 22 ayes, noes 11, 2 abstentions. Bill passes on second reading. All right, so we're now ready for bills on third reading. And we have a number of bills on the consent calendar. Okay, so I'm going to go through those very slowly. Well, actually, I'll go through those very quickly. All right, so these are bills on the consent calendar. BL 2021-993 is on consent. 2021-1000 is on consent. 1007 is on consent. 1013 is on consent. 1015 is on consent. 1022 is on consent. 1031 on consent. 1032 on consent. 1033 on consent. 1035 on consent. 1036 on consent, 1039 on consent, 1040 on consent, 1041 on consent, 1042 on consent, 1044 on consent, 1045 on consent, 1046 on consent, 1048 on consent, 1050 on consent, 1051 on consent, 1052 on consent, 1053 on consent, 1054 on consent, and 1055 on consent. Anything needs to be bumped off of there? Councilmember Murphy?
I'm sorry, I got confused on the first numbers you were saying. Did you say 1013 and 1015?
1013.
I would like those bumped.
Okay, 1013, 1015, those are 45 and 46 are bumped. Okay. Okay, anything else needs to be bumped off? All right, here we go. These are bills on third reading consent. Bill 2021-993 by Councilmember Welsh, an ordinance to amend Title 17 by changing RS10 to OR20 NS zoning for property located at 88 Thompson Lane, approximately 130 feet west of Hartford Drive. Bill 2021-1000 by Councilmember Stiles, an ordinance to amend Title 17 by canceling a portion of the Hickory Hollow Plan Unit Development Overlay District, property located at 5256 Hickory Hollow Parkway. It's approximately 530 feet southwest of Mount View Road. Bill 2021-1007 by Councilmember Lee, an ordinance to amend Title 17 by changing AR2A to SP zoning for properties located at 3163 and 3165 Anderson Road. Northern terminus of Hamilton Lane is 12.8 acres. BL 2021-1022, that's item number 47 by Councilmember Withers, ordinance to amend Title 17 by updating the corridor design overlay and the residential accessory structure overlay within Chapter 17.36.20, 17.36.540, and 17.36.590. Related to permitted facade materials, proposed ordinance requires certain materials to be restricted in the construction of buildings. BL 2021-1031, item number 49 by Councilmember Hager. Ordinance to authorize building material restrictions requirements for BL 2021-1030. Proposed specific plan zoning district, approximately located at 4321 Old Hickory Boulevard, approximately 470 feet north of Grandwood Boulevard. It's 8.52 acres. Proposed ordinance requires certain materials to be restricted in the construction of buildings. Item number 50, BL 2021-1032 by Councilmember Hager. Ordinance to amend Title 17 by canceling a portion of a plan unit development overlay district, probably located at 4321 Old Hickory Boulevard, approximately 430 feet north of Grandwood Boulevard, 4.92 acres, zone R15. BL 2021-1033, Councilmember Hager. Ordinance to amend Title 17 by canceling a plan unit development located at Old Hickory Boulevard, unnumbered approximately 400 feet south of South Oak Boulevard, 3.6 acres, zone R8. BL 2021-1035 by Councilmember Toombs. Ordinance to authorize building material restrictions requirements for BL 2021-1034. Proposed specific plan zoning district located at 2111, 2115 West Summit Avenue, 2151 Summit Avenue, approximately 330 feet northeast of Reshna Lane, located within a commercial plan unit development. Proposed ordinance requires certain materials to be restricted in the construction of buildings. BL 2021-1036 by Councilmember Toombs. Ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code by canceling a plan unit development on properties located at 2111, 2115 Summit Avenue, approximately 330 feet northeast of Reshna Lane, 14.56 acres, zone R8. BL 2021-1039 by Councilmember Syracuse. Ordinance to amend Title 17 by change from RS10 to SP zoning for properties located at 1736, 1738 Lebanon Pike, approximately 220 feet southwest of Clover Neck Drive, 7.12 acres. Permit 52 multifamily residential units. Bill 2021-1040, this is the companion bill. Ordinance to authorize building material restrictions requirements for BL 2021-1039. Proposed specific plan zoning district located at 1736 and 1738 Lebanon Pike, 220 feet southwest of Clover Neck Drive. Proposed ordinance requires certain materials to be restricted in the construction of buildings. BL 2021-1041, item number 57 by Councilmember O'Connell. Ordinance to amend Title 17 by changing from DTC to SP zoning for properties located at 170 through 176 2nd Avenue North, approximately 115 feet southeast of Church Street, located within the 2nd Avenue Historic Preservation District overlay. It's 0.63 acres. BL 2021-1042, item number 57. Glover and Roten, ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws by changing from MULA to CS zoning for property located at 304 Old Lebanon District Road at the southern terminus of Weber Road, 6.94 acres. Item number 59, BL 2021-1044 by Councilmember O'Connell. Ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, canceling a commercial plan unit development overlay district on property located at 424 Church Street, northeast corner of Representative John Lewis Way North, and Church Street Zone DTC within the Capitol Mall Redevelopment District overlay. It's 0.83 acres. Item number 60, BL 2021-1045 by Councilmember Van Rees. Ordinance to amend Title 17 by changing from RS20 to RM9 NS zoning for properties located at 115, 117 East Campbell Road and 226 Old Amqui Road. approximately 330 feet east of Highland Circle, 2.59 acres. BL 2021-1046, item number 61. Councilmember Hall, ordinance to amend Title 17, Metropolitan Code by change from RS15 to RM9 NS zoning for property located at Ashland City Highway, unnumbered, approximately 340 feet west of Cato Road, is 3.29 acres. BL 2021-1048 by Councilmember Lee. Ordinance to authorize building material restrictions and requirements for BL 2021-1007. Proposed specific plan zoning district located at 3163 and 3165 Anderson Road. Northern terminus of Hamilton Lane, 12.8 acres. Proposed ordinance requires certain materials to be restricted in the construction of building. BL 2021-1050, item number 64. Murphy, Benedict, and Allen. Ordinance to amend signage section 16.28.230 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws regarding project information signs. BL 2021-1051. Councilmember Suara and Stiles, an ordinance to adopt a plan for a Metropolitan Council of Nashville and Davidson County Internet Forum. BL 2021-1052 by Councilmember Withers. Ordinance approving and adopting a plan for redistricting the councilmanic districts of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, revising the school district pursuant to Article 18, Section 18.06 of the Metropolitan Charter. BL 2021-1053, Withers and Young. Ordinance adopting the GIS system street and alley centerline layer with the recordation of renaming, additions and deletions of acceptances and abandonments as reflected on the centerline layer to date as the official street and alley acceptance and maintenance record for the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County. BL 2021-1054 by Councilmember Sledge. Hold on just a second. So I think he's not here. Okay, so members of the council, we're on BL 2021-1054. We just noticed Councilmember Sledge is not here. And so I think we're going to have to bump it off of consent. Somebody signed on to it? Oh, Councilmember O'Connell signed on to it. Okay, so we can keep it on consent. I'm sorry. BL 2021-1054 by Councilmember Sledge and O'Connell. Ordinance approving an agreement by and between the Metropolitan Government CSX Transportation, Inc., Nashville Phase 2 Property Holder, LLC, for the construction of roadway and quiet zone improvements at the Chestnut Street and 4th Avenue South Railroad crossings. And the last one is BL 2021-1055 by Councilmembers Hurt and Taylor. Ordinance providing the honorary street name designation of Charles Dungy Way for a portion of 40th Avenue North. Anything needs to be, Councilmember Henderson, anything needs to be bumped off of the consent calendar.
Vice Mayor, could we take the 1052 redistricting off consent, please?
You want to bump off 1052? Okay, Councilmember Stiles?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I also need to bump off BL 2022 1000.
1,000?
1000, yes.
Okay, okay, that's number 43. Okay, all right. All right, so on third reading ordinances. Something's wrong here. Yeah, there's going to be committee, so it says all committee reports are in, and then I've got a third reading consent agenda committee report. That's what I was checking. All right, so I think we do have committee reports to go through. We are ready for Budget and Finance. Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Allen? Trying to make sure we got this right. BL 2021-1013 and 1050.
That did not come back before budget.
Okay, and they're not on consent. Okay, so hold on just a second.
That was approved in budget at the last
Yeah,
committee
you're
meeting.
right. Okay, so hold on. We've got so just to let you know what I've got a third reading consent agenda committee report, and I'm not sure if it's right, so I'm just
Yeah,
double
Budget
checking.
and Finance has nothing on third reading.
Okay, all right. All right, so if you don't mind, members of the, I'm going to call on certain people and make sure I've got this right. Councilmember Lee, Education has already approved 1013 and 1015, correct? You didn't have anything on there, okay. Councilmember Hancock, did you have any bills on third reading? Hold on. Councilmember Hancock?
No, I did not. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Councilmember Withers, I think, do you have some?
Boy, do I ever.
All right. So I finally found one that actually is on this list.
So,
okay, Councilmember Withers, you are recognized on the third reading consent agenda.
Thank you. So for all of these, our committee vote in planning and zoning was 12 in favor, 0 against, 0 abstentions. But that would be for 2021-993, 1007, 1022, 1031, 1032, 1033, 1035, 1036, 1039, 1040, 1041, 1042, 1044, 1045, 1046, and 1048. Each of those was 12 in favor, 0 against, 0
All right.
abstentions.
Thank you, Councilmember Withers. And where is Councilmember Young? Okay. All right. So hold on just a second. Let me just make sure. 53. All right. So what I've got on my list is 1053 was approved by Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. 1054 was also approved, and 1055 also approved by Transportation. So Councilmember Withers, you were the only one with the committee report. Can you go ahead and move passage of all bills on third reading consent?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I'd like to move passage of the consent calendar.
All right, so Councilmember Withers has moved approval of all bills on the third reading consent agenda, properly seconded. Any discussion on any of the bills on third reading consent? Seeing none, ready to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. You adopt. All right, thank you all. There was just, we had a sheet up here that had some incorrect information on it. All right, so we are now back on bills that were not on the consent agenda. Okay. The first one up is item number 43, Bill 2021-1000 by Councilmember Stiles. Ordinance to amend Title 17 by canceling a portion of the Hickory Hollow Plan Unit Development Overlay District, property located at 5256 Hickory Hollow Parkway, approximately 530 feet southwest of Mount View Road, zone SCR 12.11 acres. Councilmember Stiles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'd like to defer this to the second meeting in February.
Okay, let me get a committee report first. Councilmember Withers, Planning and Zoning.
Planning and zoning recommended in 12 in favor, 0 against, 0 abstentions.
Recommended approval or recommended approval for the deferral?
We recommended approval of the bill.
Okay, so got an approval report. Councilmember Stiles, back to you. You want to move to defer to when?
The second meeting in February, please, Vice Mayor.
Meeting in February, okay. Okay, so Councilmember Stiles has moved to defer this bill to the second meeting in February, properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the deferral motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You defer. The motion passes. Okay, thank you, Councilmember Stiles. We're now on item number 45, Bill 2021-1013 by Councilmember Van Rees, Allen, Withers, and Lee. Ordinance approving a lease agreement by and between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Education and Liberty Collegiate Academy. Councilmember Van Rees, you are recognized.
Remaining committee reports, please.
Okay, all of them are in.
Fantastic. With that, I move approval.
Okay, got a motion to approve, properly seconded. Councilmember Rosenberg, on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to give a little context to this. The state is looking at how they redo education funding, and it's not going to be good. But part of it says this funding weight would ensure that when a charter school utilizes a school facility owned by the local school district and incurs rent and maintenance improvements costs to provide school facilities for the students, additional funding will be available to support in-classroom services and resources for students, which is to say charter schools who are leasing are going to get more education funding from the state. So in this particular lease, the appraisal report that we got says that comparable rentals have an adjusted rate of $542 to $929 per square feet annually, with a mean of $671 and a median of $607 per square foot triple net, and then recommends $6 per square foot triple net. Instead, we're giving them a $5 rate. We're paying 50% of capital upgrades. We're paying for the things like plumbing, and we're even paying for trash pickup and lawn care. So I understand that this is going to go through tonight, but I think moving forward, we have to be more mindful. When somebody comes and picks your pocket as they're running off, you don't say, hey, wait, I had some cash in my other pocket too. We need to at least be getting fair market rate. And I just hope that we'll be a little bit more mindful of the use of these tax dollars in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Rosenberg. Councilmember Bradford, you recognize.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm standing up in opposition to these two bills and pretty much any charter school related bill that comes up, because by nature, charter schools are predatory. They suck all the money out of our public school systems, and this is a case in point. The commercial rent in Nashville ranges anywhere from $20 to $30. But for some reason, because these, quote, schools are operating as, quote, nonprofits, they think they can come in and get $5 per square foot at a time when our public schools are asking us each year for more and more money to cover some of the basic necessities like teacher pay, pay for paraprofessionals, pay for resources, upgrades to facilities, and just general maintenance for some of these schools that are literally falling apart. Yet by all means, let's cut these sweet deals for these charter schools who already get fully funded from Metro, who also get additional perks and benefits from the government, and schools who really don't answer to our school board or are held accountable by our school board, because anytime our school board tries to stand up for our students and our parents, they run to the state and get special exemptions. So I'm asking my colleagues here, this is an opportunity for us to generate additional revenue to support our schools that are chronically an issue. So I say we defeat these bills tonight and go back to the table and ask for more money, because it's obvious that the state will give these charter schools more money, so they need to give that money back to us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Bradford. Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The reason I bumped these off consent is because I feel like they have moved incredibly quickly, although through the process and with deferrals. I say quickly because MNPS did not even show up to the planning committee meeting knowing that we had asked questions at the previous committee meeting. Since then, they have not sent answers to several of the questions that I posed, and I'm sure questions that other council members had as well. That's embarrassing. MNPS should be embarrassed that they can't answer some of our simple questions about the funding we get now and the deal that is being cut through these leases. Whether it's a charter school, whether it is a nonprofit, whoever it is that is coming and renting real estate from MNPS, we should be able to ask questions and get those answers. MNPS is a part of Metro government. We approve budgets. We have very little control over the MNPS budget, and I think that it is disrespectful that they did not come and answer more of our questions. And here we are on third reading on leases that have already been started and basically approved. And I think at the end of the day, while we have a very strong mayor charter government, we as a council need to be more responsible in holding departments accountable, especially when it comes to budget and financing issues, when we know, not just in our terms, but in previous terms, Metro is not great at doing real estate deals, at selling, renting, buying, what have you. So I'm going to vote no tonight because I think there are a lot more questions and analysis that should have been done on these deals. And I really hope that not just on this, but in the future, that we as a body step up to our responsibility and hold the other departments accountable.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Murphy. Councilmember Allen, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I appreciate the concerns, and I do think we all need to be careful stewards of our money. I spent a lot of time with the Metro Schools budget, which is a public document that's available to anyone who cares to go look at it, and determined that there's $166 million that goes to the charter schools. out of that total $1.017 billion budget. And the remaining $850 million goes to the district schools. And the district schools then take half of that, $450 million, and through the student-based budgeting process, that goes directly to each school, and each principal gets to decide who they hire and what their staffing looks like. But the additional $405 million that doesn't go directly to the schools goes to things like transportation, pension, benefits, curriculum, special education, gifted programs, English language learner programs. Those are all things that charter schools have to pay for out of the money that they get. They also have to pay this rent, and they have to pay for the capital to build buildings if they don't happen to be the ones renting these. So I think that the answers to the questions about the funding are there. You have to dig for them a little bit, and I tried to create some nifty kind of diagram, but I'm just not that good at graphics, so I apologize that I don't have that ready to share with my colleagues. But I don't think it is an accurate statement to say that the charter schools get all the money. They get a portion, and they have to also pay for additional expenses out of that. It is not that dramatically different amount that goes to those two. And I would point out that the $5 per square foot goes to $6 per square foot next year, and then escalates 3% per year. So the market study has determined what that pay ought to be. It had been lower. This is a year of transition, and then it will go to what educational areas are paying for per square foot. So I understand concerns with ensuring that all of our children get what they need to learn well, and students in charter schools are our children, and they deserve to thrive as well. So I hope that you will support these next two bills. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Alley. Councilmember Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I appreciate very much the research that CM Allen did on the Metro Schools budget, but I don't think that the argument holds water because charter schools don't have to provide any of those services. They're not required to provide any gifted programs or after-school programs. Charter schools are not required to accept every student who comes and asks to get into the school. They are not required to provide anything that Metro Schools is as a matter of course. And so I don't think it's comparing apples to oranges in terms of what they do with this money. If you look at the records, the comprehensive records that have actually tracked the outcomes of charter schools, only 17% of all charter schools outperform any public school within the United States. 37% of them perform worse, and the rest are exactly on par with public schools around the country. I think what that says is if we would actually put the monies that are going to charter schools towards public schools, we could raise the outcomes for all of our students. Charters are not a panacea. They suck money. They're taking things away from a good day-to-day experience. We've seen what COVID has done to our schools, to our teachers, to our programming. We have seen the mental health needs of our students in Metro, Nashville Public Schools, and I think that money would be much better spent addressing those issues. So I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Welsh. Councilmember Withers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice Mayor. I mean, I just get tired of this kind of ideological, two-sided pitched battle that has been going on since before I was elected to Metro Council and still goes on today. I think Councilmember Allen did an excellent job of providing actual data from Metro's actual budget. What I will say is that I'm definitely a big supporter of my zone schools, very proud of my Rosebank schools, my zone school in my neighborhood. I also have Courthouse Special Needs School in my neighborhood, which is also a fantastic school. In addition to those, I also have Nashville Classical. I have Explore Community School. Both of those schools have majority minority students. They do provide services for special needs students. They provide all sorts of services. They do that within their student-based budgeting. Nashville Classical has a lease for the Bailey School building. It's great when you have a school building to find another school user for it. Unfortunately, our East Nashville community did not support Bailey School, which is why the student enrollment shrank as much as it did, which left us with a vacant building. I'm very glad that we do have Nashville Classical, which has come up all the way from kindergarten. They're getting now up into the upper ranges and growing in the East Nashville community. I'm glad to have them renting out the Bailey building, which was originally built in 1929 as a K-8 building, so that's a perfect fit for them. Many of the parents and even faculty at these charter schools are my District 6 constituents. I'm very proud of them and the work that they do with all of our students in this system. And so I get it that you may extrapolate out to national levels, but for the charter schools that I happen to have in District 6 and in East Nashville, they do a fantastic job working with minority students, with students with disabilities, and they provide great services to those students, and I'm very proud to have them. And I wish that folks could look at the students that are being served and not at the politics. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Withers. Councilmember Rosenberg, did you want to be, okay. That's it in the queue. We are ready to vote. We're on BL 2021-1013 for passage. There was a motion to approve by Councilmember Van Rees and seconded. Because there's going to be negative votes, Mr. Clerk, we need to open up the machines. All right, so we are voting on BL 2021-1013 for passage on third reading. Tell me when you're ready. Oh, okay. All right, so the machine's already open. Sorry. Everyone has voted. Mr. Clerk, close the machines, take the vote. Ayes 22, noes 9, 2 abstentions. Bill passes on third reading. All right, we're now ready for item number 46, BL 2021-1015 by Councilmembers Allen, Withers, Roberts, and Lee. Ordinance approving a lease agreement by and between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by through the Metropolitan Board of Education and Nashville Prep. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I'd like to move approval.
Okay, Councilmember Allen has moved approval, properly seconded. All committee reports are in. Discussion on the bill. Councilmember Withers, you want to be heard on this one? Councilmember Rosenberg on this one? Councilmember Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ditto everything from before. In this case, it was recommended to be a $5 per square foot triple net, and instead we're doing $4. We're paying 50% of capital upgrades, paying for plumbing, paying for trash pickup and lawn care. And I would also note that this particular charter school, unlike the other one, is what's called a no excuses charter school, which is, if you got a little bit of time before we vote, do a quick Google search for no excuses charter schools. It's very ugly. It might as well be a prison for kids, which is, I guess, what they're trying. Anyway, it's bad, and we shouldn't do it, and we should vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rosenberg. There you go. My screen went blank. Councilmember Bradford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I just want to be known that I'll be voting no on this one as well.
Okay. Councilmember Suara on this bill?
Vice Mayor, I just wanted to say that regardless of where we stand on charter or not, the way that I look at this is that we have empty buildings. We have buildings that we need to rent out, and we need to be able to make money off of it. This is a business transaction, making money leasing the building. I do think that the conversation of how much we do charge, or whether it's equitable, or whether it's good, whether it's small, is something that we can continue to see if we can get more on the buildings, not for these contracts, but for future ones. But for now, I think voting no is just saying you don't want Metro to make money off of those buildings, and that doesn't sound reasonable to me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Allen, on this bill, do you want to be recognized?
Thank you. Just another bit of technical information. The rent does go to $5 per square foot next year, and then it escalates at 3%.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Murphy.
Again, I totally agree that we need to make money off of empty buildings. I really hope that this administration will do a comprehensive look and include the council in looking at what buildings we have empty, how many of our departments are spending money to lease building and office space. I believe that the councilman from North Nashville and I sponsored a bill requesting lists of Metro-owned properties in our district. I don't know when that's going to start, but hopefully it will start soon. we do need to make money off of our buildings. And that needs to be a fair market rate. And if it's not a fair market rate, there needs to be a really good reason. And that should be presented to us. And in fact, there's another layer of accountability here that the school board should be looking and demanding that market rate rents are being paid unless there is a reason for it. And that reason has not been given to us. So again, I will be voting no tonight. And my no vote says we need to be a responsible government and make money where we can make money and discount rent where we should discount rent. And until we have that information, then we are continuing to throw taxpayer dollars into the Cumberland River.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Murphy. You're the last person in the queue. All right, so we are voting on Bill 2021-1015 by Councilmember Allen Withers and others for passage on third and final reading. Mr. Clerk, if you would, we are voting on Bill 2021-1015. If you would, open up the machines. Councilmember Hurt, you want to vote? All right, all votes are in. All votes are in. Close the machines. Take the vote. Ayes 18, noes 13, 4 abstentions. The bill fails on third reading. All right, we are now ready for item number 48, Bill 2021-1030 by Councilmember Hager. This is an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws by change from R15 and R8 to SP zoning for properties located at Old Hickory Boulevard unnumbered and 4231 Old Hickory Boulevard, approximately 470 feet north of Grandwood Boulevard, 8.52 acres, permit 72 multifamily residential units. Councilmember Hager, you are recognized on your bill.
I think all the committee reports are in, so I'm moving for passage.
No, I think you got one.
I got one, okay. Move.
Yeah, planning and zoning.
Move for committee report, please.
All right, planning and zoning, Councilmember Withers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. The Planning and Zoning Committee met. We considered and voted in favor of the amendment, 12 in favor, 0 against, and then the bill as amended, 12 in favor, 0 against.
All right, back to you, Councilmember Hager.
Move to pass the amendment first.
All right, so Councilmember Hager has moved amendment number 1, properly seconded. Back to you for an explanation of the amendment.
That amendment just cleans up the main bills on this. Some was left off about the building material.
Okay.
Mr. Matt can explain that a little bit better.
Where are you? Mr. Wilkinson?
The amendment just modifies condition 9 to include the companion bill number that was inadvertently excluded.
All right. Any questions about the amendment? Seeing none, Councilmember Hager has moved amendment number 1 to BL 2021-1030. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Opposed, no. Amendment number 1 passes. Councilmember Hager, you're on your bill as amended.
Move to pass it as amended.
All right, Councilmember Hager has moved 2021-1030 as amended. Properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Your bill passes on third reading. All right. We're on item number 52, Bill 2021-1034 by Councilmember Toombs. This is an ordinance to amend Title 17 by changing from R8 to SP zoning for properties located at 2111 and 2115 West Summit Avenue, 2151 Summit Avenue, approximately 330 feet northeast of Rational Lane, located within a commercial plan unit development overlay district, 14.96 acres, to permit up to 112 multifamily residential units, maintain existing telecommunication facility. Councilmember Toombs, you are recognized on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Committee report.
Councilmember Withers, planning and zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. The Planning and Zoning Committee considered this item. We recommended approval of the amendment, 12 in favor, 0 against, and the bill as amended, 12 in favor, 0 against.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Withers. Councilmember Toombs, on your bill.
Thank you. I'd like to move my amendment.
All right, so Councilmember Toombs has moved amendment number 1 in your packet. Properly seconded. Back to you for an explanation of the amendment.
The amendment requires that the developer work with NDOT to identify any traffic calming measures and pay for those measures.
Okay, you've heard an explanation of the amendment. Any questions? Seeing none, we are voting on amendment number 1 to BL 2021-1034. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Amendment passes. You're on your bill as amended.
Move for approval as amended.
Okay, so Councilmember Toombs has moved for passage on third and final reading of BL 2021-1034 as amended, properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Your bill passes on third reading as amended. All right. Let's see. Let's see what I got. We are on item number 62, BL 2021-1047 by Councilmember Vercher. It's an ordinance to amend Title 17 by change from R10 to SP zoning for property located in Murfreesboro Pike, unnumbered, approximately 560 feet southeast of Town Park Drive, located within the Murfreesboro Pike at Una Antioch Urban Design Overlay District. It's 1.73 acres. Permit automobile parking. Councilmember Vercher is not here, and no one has signed on to her bill. So the bill automatically gets deferred to the next meeting, okay? Okay, and I believe we have one more bill left. It is Bill 2021-1052, item number 66 by Councilmember Withers. Ordinance approving and adopting a plan for redistricting the councilmanic districts of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, revising the school districts pursuant to Article 18, Section 18.06 of the Metropolitan Charter. Councilmember Withers, you're recognized on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I'd like to move approval. We did consider this in the Planning and Zoning Committee on second reading, where it had a unanimous recommendation of approval on second reading. So there's not a committee report for this time, but of course, if members have questions, we're happy to try to answer those with planning staff.
All right, so Councilman Withers has moved for approval of BL 2021-1052. This is the redistricting bill for the council and the school board. Properly seconded. Councilmember Henderson, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Chair Withers, I did not have a question. It was just my intent to, I know we colleagues and the community have spent a lot of time on this, as has staff, so just want to express appreciation to planning staff and Mr. Claxton for working on this. I know several among us really struggled to incorporate all the comments of the community. I myself had one community that's up on a hilltop, one way in, one way out, still going to be in two different council districts, Councilman Druffel and myself. And in getting into that process, what I just wanted to kind of speak onto the record and for the community's understanding is some of these things that look so obvious, like, oh my gosh, why did they draw the line there? It goes back to census tracts and census blocks. And so for that Harpeth Chase community, the reason we could not make that work was because of the census tract. And so what I want to share with the body and the community is before the next decennial census, there is an interim process wherein we can revise the boundaries of these census tracts, and we need to do some of that work so that we can be responsive to community concerns and get some of these kind of oddities fixed next time. So I just wanted to kind of speak that into the record and share that with the community so that they know that council members really did spend a lot of time trying to navigate all the trade-offs with staff and be completely responsive and transparent and fair. So with that, thank you.
All right, Councilman Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to elaborate a little bit. First of all, thanks to Mr. Claxton, all of planning. They did a lot. There were, of course, some disappointments in there, but when you're dealing with 35 dominoes, the census blocks, we did have the problems like Harpeth Trace, which also is half USD and half GSD, so those poor folks. Councilmember Hauser and I share Newsom Station, which is split down the middle. And the problem is, and this really applies to those of you who are first-term members who serve in a donut district. When you get into the urban core, the census blocks are literally a block, and it's easy and it's great. Out in the more rural areas or suburban areas, you end up with these blocks that are miles wide, and they, by law, by state law, cannot be cut in half. So about halfway through the decade, which means next term, we as a municipality have the opportunity to tell the census, we want to divide this block. And so set your calendars or whatever, because we didn't do it this decade, and it's something that's really important for when the next census comes around, that you divide up those blocks in a way that reflects the growth that you've had in the districts. Thank you.
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and huge thanks to the planning department staff and Greg Claxton and his team for this really just tremendous feat that they have accomplished here. I did want to note, I know there was a lot of feedback from East Nashville, Madison, obviously, and specifically neighborhoods in District 5. Just, you know, there were a lot of proposed changes to that divided neighborhoods, and folks weighed in, and planning was amazingly able to accommodate keeping all of District 5's established neighborhoods whole. There was also a tremendous amount of feedback regarding the East Bank and either retaining that in the East Nashville districts of 5 and 6 that border the river, or grouping that in with District 19. I also want to thank, you know, all the folks who submitted feedback to that effect, or folks who submitted feedback in favor of grouping it in with District 19. I think it was overwhelmingly in favor of keeping it in Nashville, but that was ultimately not able to be accommodated by planning, and I don't want folks to feel discouraged by that. You know, there's still going to be a lot of opportunities for public engagement, and all those emails, public comment that people gave about that. It was heard. You know, my sense, and having conversations with people directly involved with the process and not directly involved with the process, was that that cake was sort of baked before the party started. So I don't think any amount of feedback that we gave would have changed that. But I do, again, want to thank everybody who contributed feedback to the process, because I think we really came out with a super positive result. And yeah, thanks again.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Withers.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I know other members wish to speak. Could you roll me to the heel of the other comments?
All right, Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'd also like to thank the planning staff, Mr. Greg Claxton, for the hard work that you did with the redistricting process. And I also like to thank the District 3 communities that spoke up. There were some gerrymandering concerns with the first proposed map, but the community came out and the planning staff listened, and we were able to make adjustments to address those gerrymandering concerns. So I just want to thank the community for coming out and speaking up, and thank you to the planning staff for your hard work and for listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, sir. I want to say, I guess I'm going to repeat what everybody else said about thank them for their hard work. I'm sure they did some hard work in some districts, but I will say I don't want it to seem like everything is peachy-dory, because my district, I'm not necessarily thrilled with it. I wanted some changes. Those changes were not done. Instead, I was given reasons why it was okay the way it was. So I just want to put it out there, because I know some of my constituents have reached out to me too, and I want to put that out there so that when they say, why didn't you say something, I will let you all know it's not hunky-dory. I was speaking to somebody at the state legislature today, and they told me that they were told that all of the Southeast legislators loved what was done in their districts. I didn't think that that was necessarily true, so I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you, sir.
All right, Councilmember Bradford.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I also want to put it out there. I know during this process, it was some difficult decisions were made by planning. Many of my constituents are still not happy that they are being cut out of what they consider historically District 13, and that there was issues with one neighborhood that's going to be in my new district being physically separated from the rest of the district by a barricaded fence. I just want to go on the record that from day one, I fought for the interests and concerns of my community, and that's how we were able to get some of the changes made between proposal A and B and the one we're voting on tonight. So to those in District 13 who are not happy with how the lines were drawn, just know that from day one, I was working on their behalf with the planning department to make sure that we got the best possible district for the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. I believe council member Withers, that's it. You're recognized.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Vice Mayor. Just appreciate the thoughts of my colleagues. I know that we're on third reading. This bill is not amendable on third reading. So that is not something to be considered, but definitely the planning staff have worked very hard. I think in particular for District 5, I know the way the maps are drawn originally, it really had divided up some neighborhoods that had always been very closely together. Got those together, then, you know, it shifted to the next little area, and the planning department did work very, very hard, along with council members all up and down the Gallatin corridor in particular, to try to find something that worked for 5, 6, 7, and 3 and 9. And it's not necessarily intuitive where all those lines are, but I think it works and most importantly, preserves the equal vote counts within the districts. One that I do want to actually speak to is Councilmember Van Rees, who's advocated so strongly for District 8. I think when Councilmember Van Rees first ran for office, it was District 4. Then that got moved to another part of the county, and so she has been the first and is the ultimate District 8 council member and champion, and has done an outstanding job with that. And one of the things that I'm really, really impressed by Councilmember Van Rees is that with the movement of District 8 to the southeast quadrant, to a different part of the county, Councilmember Van Rees really demonstrated grace and maturity and advocated so strongly for her community to make sure that they ended up in a district that made sense for them, since that district was being dissolved. So like I said, I know that you can't necessarily make everyone happy. No one has sacrificed more than Councilmember Van Rees in District 8 after having worked so hard to really define and redefine that area. So just wanted to give that praise to my colleague, and want to again thank all of the planning staff for all of your hard work, and look forward to whatever next project we're going to work on. So with that, I'll renew my motion to approve.
All right. Councilmember Van Rees, is your district floats around the city, is that correct? Hold on. Councilmember Van Rees.
We've done such a good job that we don't need it anymore, so. But I will go on record that Councilmember Jennifer Gamble has my vote for 2023 in District 3.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Stiles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. This is one of the times I think it is okay to be repetitive. The planning staff did an amazing job with this. I know the initial maps, certainly for District 32, took out a very large project, Century Farms, and after having many conversations and getting community input, they did put Century Farms back into District 32, where it began and will continue to remain so, at least for the next 10 years. So thank you very, very much for listening to council members and listening to community members to make things happen positively.
Thank you, Councilmember. You're the last person in the queue. Anybody else? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. We are on Bill 2021-1052 for passage on third and final reading. All those in favor of Bill 2021-1052 for passage on third and final reading, say aye. Opposed, no. Bill passes. Bill passes on third and final reading. Before we leave, I do think after listening to everybody talk, I know everybody's not completely happy, but a tremendous amount of work goes into this. I think we should appreciate the folks at the Planning Commission for their work. All right, I've got two people in the queue. Councilmember Benedict, for what reason?
I was trying to withdraw that.
You were trying, okay. Councilmember Hurt, for what reason? You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight has been difficult for me.
And I could not leave this chamber without speaking on how this pandemic, according to the New York Times, has all kinds of bad behavior on the rise. There are less cars on the street, but more reckless driving. Altercations on airplanes have risen. The murder rate is surging. Drug overdoses and fatalities are increasing. Americans are drinking more. Nurses say patients are getting more abusive. Tonight, council members, remember that bad behavior is on the rise, so please refrain from referring to our citizens, constituents, and neighbors as thugs or any other name you choose to use in private. They are people too, and I object to being a party to this kind of bad behavior.
Right.
Have a good night.
All right. Need a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn, properly second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. We stand adjourned.
And so the council has concluded about a 2-hour and 35-minute meeting tonight. Several significant things. First, probably the long-term biggest piece of legislation in terms of its effect was the council approval on a unanimous voice vote, at least without any dissent, to approve Bill BL 2021-1052. It's the redistricting proposal that was drafted by the city's planning commission regarding the 35 Metro Council district seats and the 9 school board positions here in Davidson County. This is required in light of the population changes that were made in the recent 2020 census. The council could either accept or reject the bill as it was drafted. They could not amend it. The commission staff, and you heard a lot of the council members at the very end praising the council staff, the commission staff for the work they did to make changes in this. They went through 3 different drafts of this before it was submitted to the council. The council, if it had rejected it, it could have been there would have been a referendum about that, and the council could have put its own plan up, but didn't seem to be a stomach for that. The councilmen did feel, on the whole, they got changes made that they liked from what they'd seen in the first 2 drafts. Still some things they didn't like as well, but overall the council felt like they needed to go ahead and move forward with this. Council also took a stand on a late resolution that was offered tonight for the asking the state legislature to move away from the idea and reject the idea of dividing Davidson County into 3 different congressional districts. This plan is being debated at the state legislature even as we speak. It's not likely that this memorializing resolution will have much impact on a Republican-dominated Hill. This is more Democratic body here, although they don't run by party labels here. The Senate will be voting, we understand, on the redistricting for the congressional seats as early as Thursday, and the House is likely to follow suit. But the memorializing resolution put the council on record about what they thought about that. 2 other measures tonight that were somewhat surprising in the sense that at least one broke a long time, almost year-long stalemate, or may have broken it over what to do about license plate readers. Council voted with 22 votes on second reading to approve a bill that would have set up a 6-month pilot program to start the use of license plate readers for Metro Police and others to use for law enforcement purposes. A lot of surrounding communities use it. They feel like we need to have that for another crime-fighting tool. There were others who are very much concerned about the privacy issues and about the potential racial profiling already. The city's community review board has come out against this. The ACLU also has questions. This bill now goes to 3rd reading. We'll be needing 21 votes on 3rd and final reading in 2 weeks on February 1st when the council meets again. There was a bill before that I think got as far as 3rd reading that I think has been deferred. There's another bill being talked about tonight. Councilmember Rosenberg may put together to give a different alternative about that. We'll see exactly what happens, but it appears, at least at this point, there's an active bill that'll be on 3rd reading on license plate readers, an issue that the council's debated now for just about a year, and it may be on its way to being resolved. The council also rejected one of 2 leases that were before this body to deal with charter schools. These are leases to allow them to lease property to operate their facilities. One for Nashville Prep failed, only got 18 votes. They did 21 on 3rd and final reading for an ordinance, so it failed. It did not pass tonight. Another one for Collegiate Academy did pass, ironically, 22-9. The bills were right behind each other. The 22-9 bill passed first. It was sort of thought after that the second one would pass as well, but it did not. It only got 18 votes. Elsewhere, the council pretty much did a lot of routine business tonight. They approved all the things that were involved in terms of money for various programs in the Parks Department. Also approved a lot of flood mitigation grant assistant requests going out to move and buy property to that are in the floodplains and floodway. Also did a number of memorializing resolutions that the council approved tonight, including that one late one we talked about for turning the state legislature and redistricting. The council is now in recess until the first day of the month of February. On February 1st, we'll be here at that time to provide live coverage. Until then, I'm Pat Nolan, and good night from the council chambers. Tonight's meeting of the Metropolitan, Nashville, and Davidson County Council has come to you live from the council chambers at the historic Metro Courthouse. It's been a public affairs presentation of the Metro Nashville Network.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.